Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet, and today I am live with a very interesting guest, and that would be somebody who is professionally known as Randy Balls. Uh, how are you doing, Randy?
Hey, I'm down here in church. Yeah, that's my mega church pastor skit. So you threw me for a loop there. I wasn't expecting Randy Balls to come up to the surface of my alter personalities, but I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me over.
It was a very fun thing. I watched it several times. So yeah, the one video. I don't know if you made more of those, but yeah,
There's two. So they're both.
Two?
Yeah, I'll have to send it. I'll send you both to see which one you haven't seen. But.
Awesome. Sound, everything okay? Everything balanced? Everyone? Yes, good. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, this was supposed to happen yesterday, but then it didn't happen. Had to move it to today, which is also kind of appropriate because the date today is a good date to talk about Islam. Some people call it an Islamic holiday. So here we are today, gathered, talking about all that. Jay, have to correct myself. You're not Randy Balls. We have to be serious with this whole conversation.
And you're not Shake Your Booty.
Not today.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the final boss of Islamic debaters. So we need to have a debate between Randy Balls and Shake Your Booty.
That would be fantastic. That's a good idea. Yeah, you are Jay Dyer, and you have recently been having interesting debates. Some very, very big ones that I reviewed here on this channel that lots of people have seen. I think your debate together with Sam Shimoon against the two pedophiles, I think that has like over 1 million views or so, right?
It's around 900,000 on Twitter, a couple 100,000 on Rumble, and then 800,000 on YouTube. So yeah, overall it's up there.
Wow, very, very nice. And I saw it, and the thing is, I mean, you guys did a fantastic job during the debate. The other side looked quite pathetic, and I don't know. It's even Muslims were conceding pretty much when you look at the average response, the feedback from audiences, that the Muslim side did not do a good job defending their beliefs. So it was a very, very good combination to watch, you and Sam Shimoon. And yeah, but I have some problems with some of the things that you said, and I basically want to confront you on your misrepresentations of Islam, and want to correct you on all that. So first off, how about we start by you just telling us who you are, where we can find you, and why we should listen to you.
Yeah, my name is Jake, the Muslim metaphysician. You can find me over at. The problem with Ridvan is that when he debates, he lies. Doing a little bit. So the funny thing was that
was pretty good, man.
That was actually supposed to be Daniel and Jake, and then Jake suddenly had the internet go out right before the debate.
Oh, how did that happen?
Yeah, weird timing. But then Ijaz stepped up, which is funny because I didn't think they actually were on the exact same page, Daniel and Jake. I mean, Ijaz, but I guess they pretended to be, buddy for the sake of the debate. But whatever. Yeah, it was a wild debate overall. I think it went pretty good for our side. It looked, if you read the comments over on the Fresh and Fit channel, I was kind of blown away at the comments. I thought we'd have a lot more like balance between, because when Muslims go to the comments, they're always like there to champion and cheerlead, no matter what happened in the debate. But I mean, the comments are just like 99% that, terrible for the side of Islam. But anyway, so yeah, I'm Jay Dyer. I do a lot of debates. I do a lot of geopolitical analysis. I do film analysis. Written a few books on that. A few books on philosophy. Host the 4th hour of He Who Cannot Be Named every Friday. Done that for 4 years. Yeah, so that's what I do.
Very, 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 very nice. You know what's funny? until you just mentioned that it was supposed to be Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, but then it was Ijaz. For some reason in my mind, I was totally remembering it the wrong way, and I thought you had a debate with Daniel Kikichu and Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, despite the fact that I watched the whole debate twice and also commented on it, which is very, very funny. It might have to do with the fact that I had my interactions with Jake, had discussions with him, was supposed to debate him. Eventually, he backed out and blocked me. but it just to come in his place was just a very, very dumb move. I don't know who organized this, who came up with him as an alternative, but at least Jake could a little bit, by being coherent, and speaking the same language, appeal to audiences, and I don't know, get some kind of popularity, even if the stuff that he says is complete nonsense. But Ijaz is just, he's not likable. He's a little weasel, incredibly disrespectful for no reason, very dishonest person. And he's on record, on audio record, calling somebody a wetbag piece of shit in a debate about Christianity.
Yeah, it was an odd choice, but I think if I recall in the DMs, originally it was going to be they wanted a job. So, and I don't know who was going to be. It was Muhammad Ajab and so, and then of course he wouldn't do it, and then he backed out of the Sam Shamoon thing, and so there's a lot of backing out going on that side. I don't know what they're so worried about, but in the case of Jake, I think the pattern I've noticed is that Jake will really only debate when it's something relating to these really sort of abstract metaphysical topics. He won't go anywhere near the Quran. He won't go anywhere near comparison of biblical texts. And I think he kind of maybe even halfway will admit he doesn't really know that stuff. So for him, it's this sort of pseudo philosophical endeavor.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. He wanted to press me on having a debate about the existence of God. I said, look, when I joined you guys, I had that debate only because I wanted to give you guys what you want, and then further have discussions about Islam. How about we have a discussion about Islam? How about we have a debate on Islam? He never would accept it. Eventually, I pressed him to accept it, and even then, and when we were about to have the debate in a few days, he made some dumb excuse about my post about Israel or something like that. And he was like, "You're horrible. I'm going to block you." And then he blocked me. And then he did the same thing with lots of other people. It's just
he did that with Sam too, where they were going to debate, and he blocked. Oh, I've decided suddenly that you're too immoral for me to debate. I'm blocking you. So
exactly, and it's not like we're doing something different from whatever we have done for years. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But let's come to your impression of Islam altogether. Of course, these are very interesting people. It's just a coincidence that they happen to have these similar personalities. Probably nothing to do with Islam. But you've had debates about Islam with Daniel now, with Ijaz, and with other people online. You have been hosting debates on your own channel, which I've seen, which seems to be doing quite well. We had conversations, you and I, about Islam in the past. What is your current impression of Islam, and how did it change over time?
Yeah, I would say if you go back 8 or 10 years ago, I knew a lot about Christian theology, and I knew a lot about the historical disputes amongst Christian groups and whatnot, church history, but I didn't really know much about Islam at all. And so I don't even remember how the Islamic debate started happening. I think I had a couple friends, the guys that run Orthodox Shahada, they were like, hey, they were part of the Discord. They said, why don't you start debating Muslims? Because we got a lot of Muslims coming into the UK, coming into Europe. It's really changing the face of Europe. So this might actually be the future, because I spent so much time debating Roman Catholics and Protestants. So I think the first debate we did was kind of a so-called debate. It was Nizam Ghafoor, and then it was Paul Williams, and then it was Shabir Ali, then it was Sheikh Azrar Rashid, and then it was I'm saying the big name Muslims, and then it was Daniel, and then Jake, and then Ijaz and Daniel. So and then Muslim Lantern. So it's kind of a snowball thing that wasn't really planned, but in that time, and I still want to call myself an expert on Islam, but I've learned a lot. Learned a lot from you, learned a lot from Sam and many other people. My impression now, maybe say compared to 10 years ago, is that it's a lot more of a cobbled together hodgepodge of varying traditions and ideas, and it's a lot more goofy than I originally thought. I would have assumed, 10 years ago, well, they've got, Avicina, and they've got, Ibn Sina, and they've got these high-minded philosopher guys that people have heard, Averroes, but then when you really get into, what the texts of the Quran and these hadiths are all about, I think it becomes more and more kind of silly. And you notice the sort of outright contradictions, especially all of the reliance on prior textual traditions from Judaism and from Christianity. The more that you know those texts, and then the more that you see the Quranic claims and texts, the more you see kind of how just cobbled together, contradictory. So in summation, I would say now I see it as kind of the perfect cult engineered to dupe the Arab mind, honestly. And so I see it as a mix of Gnosticism. I see it as a mix of Talmudic ideas. I see it as a mix of Christian texts, particularly Arian and Nestorian Christianity. I see it as a borrowing even from Greek philosophy. I had a recent discussion with a couple of people from the Shia tradition, and from their argumentation, the guy was literally saying, "Yeah, everything that's in the Quran is ultimately Neoplatonism, but that's not from the Neoplatonists; it's from the Quran." So, in other words, it's like a ripoff. It's like we rip off the Bible, but it's from the Quran, not from the Bible. We rip off the Torah, but it's from the Quran, not from the Torah. We rip off the Greek philosophers, but it's actually from the Quran, not from the Greek philosophers. You see what I'm saying? There's a pattern here of copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, put this thing together in a book, this thing, and then, but it's not from anything before. It's this. This is the real, true origin.
That's very, very convenient, right? It's like if I write a book today and say that and claim that it is actually from Allah, who visited me after 1,400 years to tell me that Muhammad had a completely different message, which was unfortunately distorted and perverted by the Muslims who followed after him. And here is what he tells me. And then I just write a bunch of stuff that I base on the Quran, on different sources, but claim that this is all completely, totally original. It is kind of ridiculous. There is something that you said, which is which I can resonate with it. That's usually how I describe Islam. Like it's cobbled together with from different traditions and sources and all that. I mean, over the years, I have pretty much, I would say, come to the idea, to the conclusion, and the argument that that Islam is basically a polytheistic religion and culture that came out of a polytheistic pagan Arab region, but then because Muhammad was apparently so much, he looked up to Christians and Jews initially. He wanted to adopt their beliefs and their traditions as much as possible, but then adopted things that he never really understood, and adopted misunderstandings, and aside from that, also adopted stories about, for example, I'm not sure if you have come across the whole narrative of Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran. That this is a character named Dhul Qarnayn. He is identified as Alexander the Great. So the Quran mentions Alexander the Great as Dhul Qarnayn, which means the two-horned one. And this just happens because some people come to Muhammad and ask him about Dhul Qarnayn, and he's like, I'll get back to you. So, so something happens then in the meantime. He gets his information about this Alexander the Great that he doesn't know much about. And then he comes back and he starts reciting revelations from Allah. About how Dhul Qarnayn was a very mighty person guided by Allah, and he went to the very west of the world and to the very east, and he saw the sun setting in a muddy spring, and saw other people that the sun was rising, above. And they had no protection against it, and I know that pretty much that he was a servant of Allah and a good guy, which is just a very strange thing because Alexander the Great was anything but a a good guy in a monotheistic sense. He was He was a syncretic
Yes.
polytheistic guy who declared himself God.
Yeah, which is actually I mean, even if you're a liberal, a lot of people think the book of Daniel is talking about the Greeks in that time period, particularly Alexander, and then his one of his generals, Antiochus Epiphanes, is who defiles the Jewish temple during the Maccabean period. So that's again another irony that the biblical revelation describes that as a pagan polytheistic Alexander Antiochus culture. Very odd that he would be described as a monotheist.
Yeah, I think you should look into that. It's in chapter 18 of the Quran. That has Surah Kaf. That has an account of the seven sleepers, which is also taken from Christians. And then after that, it goes into the whole Alexander the Great story, which is very, very funny. We even have a what's his name? Some Italian ex-ISIS jihadist guy who, when he was in prison, learned about the Alexander romance and old myths about Alexander the Great, and then he noticed, wait a minute, this sounds oddly similar to what I read in the Quran. And then he finds out that these stories came before the Quran, and then he thinks this does not make sense. So he ends up leaving Islam. This hardcore jihadist who is in prison. It's I think Antonio, no, something Ser Antonio, something like that.
Well, this is the question I want to ask you, because this is a pattern I've noticed, and when this comes up in the live stream debates that we do, I'm never actually sure what they actually think. Like, it seems to be the case that they either don't recognize or care that many of these stories, like if you read the Gabriel Said Reynolds book, he lists about, I don't know, 4 or 5 different texts that were like pseudepigrapha or Gnostic texts that appear in different forms and in different ways in the Quran. And what I'm wondering is, like, do they not admit that these things came before, or do they think that no, it doesn't even matter that it came before? Because like when I was talking to that guy about Neoplatonism, and he's like, no, well, the Quran is basically teaching Neoplatonism, and I'm like, but wouldn't Neoplatonism be where the Quran is getting that if that's the case? And it's like, no, it's actually new to the Quran. Or Greek atomism, right? A lot of the Sunnis are atomists. And it's like, well, the Greeks taught atomism. No, but it's in the Quran.
Yeah. Well, it's the thinking evolved very much over time. Today, generally, the response that you get when you point out that lots of these things come to the Quran from prior sources, whether these sources are actually correct on these things or not, they will ignore your explanation and then bring an alternative explanation, or simply argue that Allah knows best, and he's the one who sent the Quran, and he knows what he's talking about. It's not for us to question. This is, for example, something that's happened when I made a video talking about the 7 sleepers narrative and all that, and how the Quran twists it, and how if we accept that the 7 sleepers story is authentic and that the Quran acknowledges it, then we have to accept that the triune God is the true God, and Christianity is true. And then when I do that, they start. It starts getting completely fallacious about how it doesn't have to go back to the Christian story. It might be a different story. It might be the true story. It might be that the Christians took it, wrongfully from somewhere else. It was actually a real story about something good. And in the end, we should not question it because Allah knows best. This is usually some of the thoughts, some of the responses that they will give to these things, similar to Alexander the Great. Initially, within the first centuries, Muslims acknowledged generally that the references were about Alexander the Great. It has become the new thing lately, more recently, to say, no, it's not Alexander the Great, it is somebody else. We don't know who it is. And we can't know because it is not specified. But it's probably not Alexander the Great, given the revelations that we have now about who he actually was. But this is just the thing. Like, the understanding develops and is corrupted by Muslims as they further understand how problematic it actually is what they are presenting to us, such as that the Quran takes stories inappropriately, or ideas inappropriately, or twists stories into being. There's lots we can talk about. What do you think?
Before you move on, one other question on that topic. I forgot to mention when I was talking about influences, the Islamic Arab paganism is also, I think, pretty clearly, obviously, an influence. And I mean, I'd heard people say that maybe 10 years ago, but I never really looked into that. But I do think that's there within the tradition. I mean, you know, icons are idolatry, but you can kiss this black stone and it's not idolatry. So it's sort of, it's a double standard. And why is it not idolatry? Well, because it says so in the Hadith that you can do it. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of double standards, a lot of inconsistency. So my question to you would be, do you think, and I think we talked about this last time we were discussing, and you were talking about the killing all the pigs Hadith. Do you think that it's a situation where you had, and I know we're going to kind of speculate because we don't exactly know what was going on, but is it a situation where you think Muhammad was like just sort of out of it and was just being influenced by his epilepsy and seizures, or do you think that he was really kind of like, or maybe even him and some of his crew, like, do you think it was a situation where they were trying to put together a religion that they could manipulate for warlord purposes, you know, for wealth purpose, for all kinds of purposes? Because even David Wood's recent video where he was talking about the places in the Quran where it says, well, the Jews have the Hebrew revelation and the Christians have a revelation in their tongue. This is the revelation for you, Arab people. So it's almost like it was initially intended to be directed towards the Arab peoples as their version. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was early in the, you know, Muhammad's campaigns or something like that before it turns into, no, this is actually a worldwide conquest.
Yeah. There is two interesting topics here, and two very, very deep topics actually to go into. But one which is the latter that you brought up, also based on what David Wood mentioned. So Muhammad initially did start out as merely a guy who is sent by the same God who also sent or revealed the gospel and the Torah, as the Quran says. And Muhammad really did look up to Jews and Christians and wanted to adopt their beliefs and ideas and claim that he comes from the same God. But the thing is, if you analyze the Quran chronologically, the Quran barely ever even touches on Jews and Christians within the first 10 years or so, until Muhammad flees his pagan environment in Mecca and goes to Medina, where he then encounters large Jewish tribes that basically built the city. And as he interacts with them, the Quran suddenly starts focusing on Jews and Christians and their stories and beliefs. So it seems that the Quran's content is very, very much influenced by whatever Muhammad is.
Where he's at.
Where he's at, what is around him, what he interacts with, what is currently important to Muhammad's context. And initially he approaches them in a good way, like, hey, Jews, Christians, what's up? I'm just like you guys. You know,
we're all on the same team.
Yeah, same team. Let's join together. And it even proposes in the beginning to the Jews and Christians, let us come together to an agreement that there is no God but Allah, and so on. But as he then finds out that the Jews don't really respect him at all and think actually that he's ridiculous and full of crap, he starts getting more and more angry at them. Then he develops this idea that the Jews are bad, but the Christians, they're cool, they're good. Then the Christians start rejecting him, and then he's like, okay, Christians are bad too. Christians will go to hell. But along those, while having those developments, he simply he absorbs whatever he hears and whatever is given to him. There is I would say it is quite mixed what his motive is, what his reasoning is when he gets his stories and beliefs into his own religion. I would say that there is very strong evidence that suggests that he had some sort of epilepsy, that he had hallucinations. There are early narratives that he would come back from seeing the angel Jibril, and then he would be terrified and he would fall on the ground and start shaking and making loud noises and sweating. They would have to cover him up, and he would make loud snorting noises when he would get a revelation from Allah, which sounds oddly like a form of epilepsy. But it could very well be that he was actually deceived by his own hallucinations, by his own insanities, and that he actually did believe that he was getting revelations from Allah. But he was also convinced by other people around him, that who helped him basically shape the narrative that he was getting from his Jibril character.
Yeah.
You have, for example, in the Quran, multiple times people accusing him from taking stories from certain people around
Mm.
him, and they call him the ear, by which they mean that he just listens to somebody who comes to him, and then takes whatever that person says and then includes it into his own religion as if they were original stories. It's very hard to speculate and to figure out what exactly his motive was. But there are also instances, for example, where his dear friend and second Caliph Omar openly says in the Hadiths, he says that Allah agreed with me on 3 occasions. He says this is a follower of the close follower of Muhammad. For example, he suggests when he sees that Muhammad's wives go to the bathroom out in the desert somewhere, he repeatedly tells them, I see you, you should be hiding." Very creepy. And then he goes to Muhammad and says, Muhammad, cover your wives up. They need to be covered up. And eventually Muhammad is like, okay, fine. And then he receives a revelation in which Allah says that they should not go outside anymore unless necessary, and that they should be covered up. And Omar goes, oh, good, Allah agrees with me. So it seems that that these people around Muhammad have an influence on what Allah reveals to Muhammad, and Muhammad also does. And it's hard to speculate always whether Muhammad was deliberately making things up, whether others were in on it, or whether he was self-deceived.
Well, great parallel. I'm sure you've heard a million times, but it very much reminds me of Mormonism and the way Mormonism operated with, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young. You kind of have this inner core of the original Mormon crew. They have these new revelations. They say that the prior revelation is fine, except when it contradicts the new revelation. So it's really just the same circle that we find with the Islamic dilemma for Islam, for Muslims. You've got the polygamy, you've got the weird polytheistic elements in Mormonism. I mean, there are a lot of parallels there, but the patterns are always that you look back to the previous revelation only when it confirms the new revelation. And again, in the case of Joseph Smith, I think there's multitudes of influences as well. And he seems to be similar to Muhammad as well in what you're describing, that he kind of hears all kinds of different things, because there's this story that Joseph Smith went to all the different denominations. And so he hears all these different stories, and then he decides they're all wrong. He goes in the woods and prays, and then this angel appears to him, just like the angel appearing to Muhammad. And then there's a new revelation based on these new texts. And only the Book of Mormon is really the infallible text, and everything else has to be judged by it. So, I mean, the patterns are the same for most cults, actually. I would say a lot of cults. But I think if you look at Mormonism, just from that cultural perspective, it's really geared towards, 1800s, prairie-minded people moving west. Islam very much oriented towards, 7th century Arabs. And my next question to you would be, would that explain the seeming contradictions about what Muhammad says about Christians and Jews? Because it seems like at times it sounds like we're all people of the book. We all are fine. Let the Jews judge by the Torah. Christians can go judge by their revelation. But then later we get this. But also, if you're a Trinitarian, you're going to hellfire, right?
Yeah. I actually put together a list of Quran verses about all Quran verses that address Christians or that mention Christians directly in chronological order, and you can observe a very clear pattern there. At the beginning, very peaceful and reconciliatory, and then it gets more like, okay, you are wrong, but we are still okay. Yeah. You are totally wrong. You should follow your book instead of making up things. Until finally, the final chapter of the Quran in chronological order is chapter 9, where the Quran completely shifts to Christianity is unacceptable. It will not be accepted. You have to become Muslims or else. And then finally you have chapter 9, verse 29 and 30, where it says, fight those who do not believe in Allah and his messenger, who do not adopt the religion of truth, meaning Islam, among those who, among the people of the scripture. So Jews and Christians who do not adopt Islam are now declared enemies and are supposed to be fought and subjugated and humiliated. And then it further says that this is because of their false beliefs, of their wicked and false and corrupt beliefs, and Allah will punish them and curse them and so on. So that is indeed the explanation for it. There are some people who, of course, choose to point out the good verses and leave out the bad ones. But if you read it all in context, it is just a development of Muhammad's perception of Jews and Christians. Initially, he thought they were okay. Then later, as they didn't accept him and saw the ignorance in him, he turned more and more against them and declared war on them.
Yeah, you have people on the left a lot of times that think that, Islam is their ally. They only pick out the verses that are early on, like you're talking about. Well, look, see it. I had a guy come on the stream the other day and he's like, you're totally wrong. Islam has no, anti-Christian, anti-Jewish animus. It's only conciliatory. And I'm like, you're just using the texts that are early on. You're not using the other texts. So yeah, I think that's but again, that's why it's a very crafty book, because it allows, let's say you're a caliph in the Middle Ages sometime or something, and let's say you want to go to war against Christians or Jews. Well, you've got ready-made passages that would support going to war. Let's say you're in a political situation where you need peace. Well, you've got ready-made passages you can cite about peace. So it's useful for what's necessary at the time.
Exactly. And they used this whole... this was always historically very important. Just to put on the screen here, the verse 929, which is, I think, my go-to verse when it comes to explaining the Islamic stance on non-believers, specifically Jews and Christians. There are others, such as 98:6, which says explicitly that Jews and Christians and polytheists who don't believe in Islam are the worst of creatures and Muslims are the best of creatures. But here 929 says, fight against those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and his messenger have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of truth, that is Islam, from those who were given the scripture. So Jews and Christians, if they don't adopt Islam, fight them. Fight until they give the jizya, which is protection money, willingly while they are humbled. And there are people who will twist what jizya actually is, and they say, oh, it's just a tax, man, just a tax. But it's quite clear historically. Jizya is specifically for disbelievers. It is supposed to be taken from those who want to live as subjects of Muslims and not convert to Islam. If they fail to give it, then they are fair game. So this is basically protection money. That's literally what it is.
Yeah.
And further...
said, I had this one noted. What was the other text? You said something...
Oh, 98,
98
verse 6. That's what I mentioned, which would be this one. Indeed, they who disbelieve among the people of the scripture and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. And it further goes on saying, indeed, they who have believed and done righteous deeds, those are the best of creatures. And if you read the whole chapter, which is a very short chapter, within context, it does indeed talk about those Christians and Jews who refused to accept Muhammad as true messenger. So that's basically what this is about. That they were cool until Muhammad arrived.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, yeah. But enough about being so terribly Islamophobic. What do you think, with all your interactions that you've had, I'm sure you also had some good impressions of Islam. So what do you think is actually a good Islamic argument that you've heard?
That is a tough question.
I know.
Do you mean the best, which opponent performed the best, or what is, if I were to steel man Islam, their best argument overall?
The second one. Or yeah. So something that sounds kind of strong-ish or strongest given the standards of Islam, and that is actually a good argument for Islam.
I don't think it's a good argument, but I think it's the most successful argument probably is the fact that they will appeal to the assumption of generic Unitarianism and the idea that, well, we know the Shema says one God. Didn't Abraham worship one God? Jesus believed in one God. And so I think that's the most successful argument. Because the Trinity is a complex doctrine. I don't think it's a good argument. I think that when you look at the texts, it's very easy to see that the Torah, the prophets, they do teach more than a bare generic Unitarian deity. But I think that for most people who are not very well studied in the scriptures, they don't know their Bible very well, that can be a very convincing argument. And then they always try to sort of put us on the defensive as if we have, an insurmountable challenge in trying to demonstrate the Trinity. And one way they also are successful in that is that they always try to assume that you're going to prove or disprove this by one text, one verse. And that's not really fair. First of all, because they expect us to not, demand they prove a doctrine from one verse in the Quran. But yet we have this burden of proof that the Trinity or Jesus being God has to be this verse, or Jesus has to say, I am God, or I am Yahweh, or you must believe in the Trinity. Where do Bible say Trinity? So those are, unrealistic expectations for how, we don't believe that that's how you would go about proving it. And by the way, you don't believe that about your book. So I think those are the most successful arguments I've seen that them have. Maybe second would be, challenges about how can Christ be fully God, fully divine? They always have these assumptions about what that must mean. It must mean that if there's an incarnation, it must mean that God changed. It must mean that, there's some sort of alteration in the divine nature or something like that. Those, I think, are successful. I'm being honest. I'm trying to think of what would be the best argument that they have. I think those are the most successful, but I don't think they're very good arguments. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't really think of how I could steelman Islam other than just that most people tend to assume that monotheism, which is actually a really late term, must mean Unitarianism.
It's a funny thing. I just asked you this question, but when somebody asks me this question, I honestly don't know what to say, because I have my disagreements with a purely atheistic perspective and a purely Christian perspective. But if somebody asked me, strong arguments for either one, I would be happily present those. But if somebody asked me that about Islam, it's just, I don't know, because it's all quite pathetic, honestly.
It's pretty wild. I think maybe the best argument I could say that I've heard, maybe Dr. Khalil has an interesting take, because he'll go into like Neoplatonism. But I find it really hard to believe that I'm supposed to think that unlettered, illiterate Arab guys in the 7th century are actually really teaching Neoplatonism.
Yeah.
That to me, that's really kind of outlandish.
Also, considering the fact that if you actually look into the earliest accounts of what people at that time believed, if you go by Muslim standards, who will often appeal to reports by early Muslim scholars about the earliest beliefs of Muslims, you will find that according to the traditions, according to the earliest exegetes, the companions of Muhammad believed that the world was a shaking ground on the back of a whale that swims on the water.
Well, yeah,
and,
okay.
And that Allah put the mountains into the earth in order to stabilize it and prevent it from shaking, but that this whale moves around and sometimes that causes earthquakes and things like that.
Well, so this is funny because I think this hits on a key point here that we brought up last time we were talking, which is when you were talking about the pigs, my assumption was, well, surely that's some sort of like symbolic language, because I think, in terms of Jewish and Christian exegesis, there's a recognition of symbolism, metaphor, all types of different levels of interpretation of the text. But especially in early Islam, no, it's literally just saying that there's no mystical meanings. And so if you were to take, say, a Dr. Khalil position where he wants, and he's very emphatic that in the Shia tradition, they believe, like Christians and Jews, that there's sort of multiple layers of meaning to the text. There's a deeper sort of allegorical or spiritual meaning to a lot of these texts. Now, look, if that's the case, if there's these deeper esoteric meanings, and if the Quran is really teaching me Neoplatonism, I would expect that they would get the basics and the historical simple things right if there's these deeper meanings. But if it doesn't get the basic facts about what prior revelation said about, for example, the Ark of the Covenant is a box that has wings on it that flies around, that it has Moses' private family jewels in it. I mean, I would expect you would get at least what the Ark of the Covenant. That's not what the Ark of the Covenant is. Like it's not a Amazon drone with Moses' family jewels in it, right? It's a box that's in the temple. That's a big gold thing with golden angels on it. It's not a thing that flies. So, yeah, I mean, you see what I'm saying? If there was actually a deeper esoteric, then you would at least be getting the literal stuff right.
That's correct. I saw after our discussion last time when we were talking about how, according to Islam, Jesus will come back and will kill the pig. That was apparently a highlight, and somebody responded to it and said that there is actually a more sinister meaning behind it. And I thought, I see what you mean, and I see what you're doing, and I see how you say that there is a sinister Islamic implication about what pigs represent and what breaking the cross represents. However, you're giving Islam too much credit here. It's really not that deep. It is very, very, very primitive, extremely primitive in its in the way it handles things.
Well, if it wasn't, and I don't mean to cut you off, but let's say Dr. Khalil's correct that really Islam is this deeper esoteric stuff. Well, then why is it so clouded and clogged up with the goofy hadiths that aren't deep and esoteric?
Well, there are some very deep hadiths, to be honest. For example, one which I would like to have your input on would be one thing that Muhammad said, which was, the eyes are the leather strap of the anus.
I knew you were going to bring something absurd. I was like, for 1 second, I was like, oh, what if he's gonna bring out Muhammad's physical treatise on reality and being, and it's the eyes of the leather strap of the anus. That's a new one to me. I didn't know that. That does sound pretty deep.
This is an actual hadith. It goes.
I guess you could give like a esoteric. I don't know what it would be, but by the way, on that topic. You know what this actually sounds really similar to? Have you ever heard of Jim Jones's? He would go into these long, weird discourses, and he has this idea that God farted out the universe. I mean, I know it's goofy, but you find at times these cult leaders will they'll kind of spill the beans on. It's just crazy BS. You know what I mean?
No pun intended. Beans. But yeah, Jim Jones is my favorite cult leader, so I know quite a bit about him.
He's your favorite. You collect them like Pokemon. You got cards.
Yeah. I finally got this one. Interesting stuff. Yeah, but just to explain to you what the deep meaning of the eyes of the leather strap of the anus means, what Muhammad meant when he said that was. So you are supposed to do the ablution whenever you do a prayer, right? But if you go to sleep and you fall asleep, you don't have full control over your anus anymore, and you might fart, which might invalidate the ablution. So his idea was the eyes are what keep the anus shut, because they are the leather strap that keep it shut, like on a bottle back then. What if you close the eyes, then the leather strap is loose and farts might get out, so you would have to, given that is a possibility when you wake up, you have to do another.
No, I'm not really into Freudian stuff, but it would be really amusing to see a Freudian analysis of these hadiths and what Muhammad was up to. Well, no, that's a wild one. I mean, are the hadiths basically just a giant encyclopedia of like crazy stuff that people are discovering like on a daily basis? Like, is this just endless, this stuff?
It's just, much of it is just so random. It is. So I have a collection here.
Yeah, by
Which
the way,
I'm.
I've got them on order, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih
Mhm.
Muslim. So
I actually have one that I recommend to you, which is Sahih Bukhari with
yeah.
all repetitions removed.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So it's relatively short compared
yeah.
to the whole thing. But if you go through it, or I have another one which is mass transmitted verified hadiths listed in one book, and much of it is just completely useless information
Hmm.
that is just put in there where Muhammad says something totally irrelevant, and then people just report on it and deliver it, and that's it.
I'm gonna walk down to the horse store today. Oh, okay.
Well, there
Like
there
what?
are
Like what, just random stuff.
Oh, there's also some interesting weird detail that David likes to bring up. For example, like that Aisha says that sometimes there was a lot of semen on Muhammad's clothes, and she would have to really scrub it off very very hard, and he would still have spots on it when he would go to the mosque to pray. So things like that, like interesting, important stuff, theologically important and crucial stuff. Uh, um, Moving on. What is the worst thing you have heard from Muslims in terms of arguments? I know this is a very tough one, even worse than the
I
first
think
question.
one of the things that stands out as just kind of silly was when Azrar Rashid, when we were debating about the incarnation, and he said that there's no way that God could be incarnate and come into the womb of a woman because he would have to pass through a vagina. Vaginas are unclean. And, I might have mentioned this last time. I don't know, but it's like, well, but didn't Allah create vaginas? I mean, what? So I mean, but then again, it's like, well, yeah, but Allah can create good and evil, dark and light. He creates the wicked as well as the good. He wills evil directly as well as the good. So, I mean, if Allah is the greatest of deceivers, then like, why is it wrong anyway, right? So I thought that always stands out as a funny objection. The worst stuff, I think, is like when they really try to go into what they think is a knock against Christianity. Oh, so when Christ became incarnate, he had body parts, and yet don't the Hadith say that Allah has gonads and Allah is 90 feet tall, and so it's like a lot of what they think is a gotcha ends up being absurd in terms of their own hadiths. Worst argument, I think the Islamic dilemma is pretty stupid if you think about it. Like, you want this book to be confirmed by the prior revelation, and then literally, like Ijaz said in the debate when Sam pinned him, he said, what did Ijaz say? Yes, it's all corrupt, but a lot of places in it are true when it confirms the Quran. Thank you for literally saying what we were looking for you to admit. So he didn't even catch that he admitted like the very thing that we were saying was pretty devastating. That one stands out.
And it's a very, very clear display of a fallacy,
Yeah,
and he just says it right away.
word for word. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. But this is the perspective. This is what you are left with. Initially, the Muslims thought that the Torah and Injil contain truth, and they are the truth actually, and they were revealed by Allah, and they are truth as they are. And Jews and Christians are supposed to still follow those books. And this narrative never really changed in the Quran. There is no
Yeah.
single Quran verse which actually explicitly says that those books are no longer authentic, or that they have been literally
Right.
physically corrupted. It still insists that they should have just followed those books, or should just follow those books. But you can't really make sense of it, because if you actually open those books and read them, then you have to conclude that Islam is false.
Right.
You can't have both religions to be true at the same time, or three true at the same time.
Well, this suggests too that Muhammad was probably relying on a lot of people who couldn't read.
Yeah.
So he's relying on an audience that, even though he's saying you can check with what came before, I'm saying everything consistent with it. Well, if I actually go and read it, obviously that's not true. So I think the assumption was that maybe most of the audience is not actually going to do that, or they don't know what the texts actually say. And then also, I think this one gets overlooked because I notice more and more Muslims saying this, but it's a really stupid argument when Daniel said, look, Islam is simple, and wouldn't God make the true religion more simple? Therefore, it's got to be Islam, right? I mean, to me, that's just such a stupid argument. Number one, because first of all, it's a fallacy to think that because something appears to be simple or that it's similar to grasp, it's a version of Occam's razor fallacy. That has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. I mean, errors can be very simple. Does that make the errors true because they're simple? I mean, it's silly, right? But also, the Quran itself says in multiple places, we've made everything clear. Everything is extremely clear, very clear. Like it says this over and over and over. And then there's another verse where it's like, well, many of these verses, only Allah knows what they mean. Well, now I thought they were extremely clear, right? So wait a minute, is the Quran extremely clear, or is it complex and only Allah knows many of these passages and what they mean? So by that very definition, it's not true. And then also, Daniel knows good and well that, and by the way, it's happened ever since that debate on Twitter, and after the Muslim Lantern debate, they're all arguing over the attributes again, which is what I brought up in both debates that they've debated and killed each other over. Both of them, both debates, the Muslims lied and acted like, what is Aqidah? Never heard of this. Oh, this is never what? What are you talking about? Acting like there weren't famous wars and debates over the eternal Quran, over the attributes and the essence. And they're now debating it on Twitter, exemplifying the thing I said, that they debate this. When in the debates, they said, we don't debate this stuff. We all agree Allah is one. So they play word games. They know good and well that I wasn't saying that, yes, of course, you all say Allah is one, but what that means, you all fight over. That's the point. So no, it's not simple.
There was a very, very dirty moment by Muslim Lantern, who probably stole his name from me, ex-Muslim Lantern, who said during the debate when you talked to him about Aqidah, he's like, Aqidah, I don't know what's Aqidah? What's Aqidah? What's Aqidah? If you want to joke about it for a second, okay, go ahead and do that. But he's actually using that as a debate tactic, pretending that he doesn't know what Aqidah is, because he's like, oh, you mean Aqidah, not Aqidah. You know exactly what is being said. You're not being funny. You're not ignorant. You know exactly what's being said. But he actually dodges the issue by saying, "Oh, I don't know what that is," which is a very interesting tactic. It's just within Islamic apologetics, it is considered acceptable, widely acceptable, to simply deceive, to lie, to trick the opponent, to be dishonest. And this shouldn't be the case. This shouldn't be the case for a religion that supposedly represents this ultimate, fantastic, great morality.
Exactly.
As opposed to all the corruption in the world and all the people who went astray. This shouldn't be it. If you lie, if you act dishonestly during debates, this just says a lot about your religion.
Well, it signifies a weak position.
Exactly.
If this is a strong position, I don't need a bunch of tricks and cunning and schemes and tactics. I can simply present the positions. I can present the truth. I'm not going to have to rely on tactics that, again, obviously signify a weak position.
Yeah. And the whole thing about the Trinity versus Tawheed is a very, very interesting perspective. I get it. They like to appeal to that because they can get the average Muslim follower to say, "Oh yeah, look, makes so much sense," which is a very weird way to handle things. It mostly appeals to Muslims who already believe in the Tawheed. Will say, "Yeah, look, Trinity doesn't make sense. Look, Trinity is too complicated." Well, first off, I never agreed, and personally don't agree, that the simple belief in the Trinity, within the Triune God, is a complicated issue. It may be complicated if you go further into the first centuries of Christianity, for example, and discuss the nature of God, discuss the Christology in detail, and all that. But these are things that Christianity handled in the very beginnings, a long time ago. Similarly, Islam had disagreements, as you just mentioned, about the nature of Allah, further about the Quran's createdness, whether the Quran is created or not, or is an eternal speech of Allah that always pre-existed or not. Then they had an issue on predetermination and free will, which they killed over. there was one group known as the Mutazila who stuck onto the point that that predestination doesn't make sense, and that the Quran is created, and they were
Right.
declared heretics and
Right.
fought and also killed and punished over these things. If you want to come to the complications of the details of your theological beliefs, we can also talk about Islam in that regard. There is nothing really complicated about Jesus, about the divinity of Jesus, about the Holy Spirit, about God the Father, and so on. Plus, they also engage in this tactic where they specifically talk about the doctrine of the Trinity and the Council of Nicaea, for example, and act like prior to this, Christians didn't actually hold on to the idea that there is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, when we know very well that this is early Christianity. The first sources on Christianity talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. If you want to specifically talk about the formalization of the Trinity, that is a different matter. But that in no way invalidates the belief in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which was always there, right?
Yeah, we did a stream with Inspiring Philosophy, which you can find on his channel still, where we spent about 2.5 hours going through just first and second and third century patristic text references to the Trinity. And so, first of all, the word is used prior to Nicaea. You can find it in Theophilus. You can find it in Tertullian. And even though Tertullian did not end his life Orthodox or in the church, he does have a lot of historical texts that attest to the beliefs of that time. And so, there's a plethora of information and texts from Irenaeus to Ignatius to Clement to Theophilus of Antioch to Cyprian to Athanasius, Alexander, all who have famous written texts prior to Nicaea that basically demonstrate that when Nicaea comes together and meets, they're not saying anything new. And this actually, another example of this is that, and I'm not singling out Inspiring Philosophy here, but a lot of Protestants actually end up becoming Orthodox or Catholic over this point because they realize that, hey, I can actually go read all of these people from these first 3 centuries. Most Muslims that I've encountered are not even aware that there are these people, unless they want to go to one text in Tertullian or one section of Justin Martyr, where suddenly now, right, they teach anti-Trinitarianism. Well, I don't think they teach anti-Trinitarianism if you look at the context. And Shmoon has a video where he goes into what Tertullian's actually saying. If you read that whole passage, ultimately it doesn't even matter because, Tertullian left the church. So I don't have a problem admitting that Tertullian made errors. They'll also do this weird trick too, where they sort of expect, the Christians to hold to some standard that they have. And in our perspective, we don't think that every church father has to say everything perfectly or get everything correct. They can make a mistake. It's the judgment of the church from the Christian perspective as to whether somebody like Origen is a heretic or Tertullian is a heretic, or whether someone like Justin Martyr, even if he didn't say something perfectly, is still within the bosom of the church. So they have these kind of weird, just all over the place standards that they'll expect your position to conform to what they expect. For example, yesterday I was debating with a Muslim, and he said, this was a new one. This is a funny version of this. He says, Torah has to be like the Quran, a direct revelation to Moses that Moses spits out from Allah. He says that's what Torah is. And he
because
said,
that's the Islamic standard, right?
yeah, it's like at the end of it, it talks about Moses dying. And so therefore, Torah is not what you have. I'm like, that's your idea as to what Torah is. That's not what we believe Torah is. So I'm not bound by your standards, right? So I think there's a real deficiency when it comes to they seem to be typically incapable of understanding what our position is, and I think they don't want to. I think there's a desire to not even care what the other position is, which is funny because if you want to be a really good debater, you want to know the other person's actual position.
That's true. The problem is that Islam is incredibly ignorant. It lacks the knowledge of the biblical tradition, biblical
Exactly.
beliefs and scriptures. The Quran is a tiny book in comparison to the Bible that you have. It is a tiny book compared to the Christian Bible, a tiny book compared to the Tanakh. It is a tiny book compared to Christian Jewish tradition. It does not compare. And coming from that position, from that perspective, from what Muhammad and his followers developed in the 7th century, and then judging the Bible
Yep.
and expecting it to be on your standard, expecting it to be
Right.
to abide by your standards is ridiculous. It is completely ridiculous, and they make a lot of mistakes there, including. They don't understand what the Bible actually is. They don't understand what the Torah actually is.
Right.
They don't understand what the gospel,
The Injil,
actually
right?
is.
They
The
think it's a
Injil.
book that floated down, right?
Yeah, exactly. They don't know. They when you explain to them what the Gospels actually are, they think, "Oh, it can't be true." Well, so people wrote it. Well, no, it must be revelation. It must be Allah. Must be speaking it. And so this
Yeah.
is not true. This is not gospel.
Yeah, I was
That
just
is
listening
gospel.
to so Dr. Khalil just did a long talk contrasting the Athari and the Ashari, or well, Ibn Taymiyyah Salafi Athari view versus the Ashari view of not just attributes, but also in what way the Quran was spoken by Allah, and then Allah made Gabriel understand the uncreated speech so that he could then tell Muhammad to write down a created version of the Quran. But what's missed here is that it's never really answering the objection that we have, and I've been bringing up back all the way back to the Shabir Ali debate. I'm not saying I'm the first person to say this. I'm sure many other Christians have brought this up, but it's like, okay, but if what's in here is created, and there's no likeness to the uncreated, it's still begging the question how we ever know we're being told anything accurately about Allah, because you can't have any images of Allah. Allah is nothing like creatures like 42. Is it 110? 42 and 110, I think. There's nothing like Allah. Okay, so if there's nothing like Allah, then you understand these are created images on a piece of paper. How are they telling us anything about uncreated speech? And so they're always in this back and forth. We had a guy on last night, a Muslim guy, arguing this last night. He says, well, the representations of Allah's attributes. Okay, was a representation not an image? Is Adam not made in the image of Allah? I thought there's no images. Well, they're conceptions, and conceptions are in the mind. Okay, is your mind not created? So they just keep moving the problem back a step, right? So how are we avoiding idolatry when we say, this word here picks out Allah's attribute here? So you need some kind of analogy. If there's no analogies, then these created things aren't telling us anything about Allah. And I've never heard them really give any clear answer. They're all over the place, depending upon which Akida you're talking to.
This problem is why the Hanbali point of view, which later developed the whole idea of the Athari point of view, the traditionalist or ultra traditionalist revivalist point of view, which is why they developed this whole idea of what we know about Allah comes from several sources, that he has at least one leg, 2 right arms, and but we are not supposed to think about this any further. Do not ask how. So do not ask how then became this phrase that is actually known as a doctrine, bila kayf, which was specifically established in order to prevent any further discussion about the nature of Allah and how we are supposed to understand it, and to simply accept the description as it is, but not to imagine it and not to discuss it. But the thing is, once you describe those things and I start imagining it, it's too late already. So
Yep, you started that. Yeah.
I already have something in my head, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I kept bringing up to Jake. It's like, what is an uncreated foot that's nothing like a human foot, but that's a foot? And by the way, it gets really silly when you get into the Ibn Taymiyyah's theology of perfections, right? Because he starts arguing that, well, Allah has to laugh because laughing is more perfect than not laughing. Yeah, I'm serious. And so then it becomes, well, wouldn't it then be more perfect to eternally laugh than to just laugh once? So Allah's like the Joker, like he's constantly laughing, right? I mean, you see how silly this gets, and then it's like, so how many toes is a perfect foot? Like, wouldn't 7, because that's a perfect number, wouldn't that be more perfect to have 7 toes and have 5 toes, 6 toes? Like, what's the perfect number of toes on the uncreated foot? Yeah, silly this is, but that's literally, it's not. That's literally how Ibn Taymiyyah is arguing. He's saying, he actually says it is more perfect for Allah to laugh than to not laugh.
Well, it is the perfect thing is to have an unlimited amount of toes, actually. So,
so it's in toes, right?
Yeah,
but that's not right. So, but Christianity is absurd, but not that. Okay, sure.
No. Small question to viewers: is this stream frozen? What's happening here? I don't see any new chat coming in. The last chat is from several minutes ago. I see some reactions. What's happening here? I don't get it. It's weird. I just checked on 2 different platforms and I don't see the chat updating for some weird reason.
I feel like my chat was kind of freezing. But if I look on your stream on my phone, your chat's frozen, but you and I are talking.
Yeah, the last chat is from behind you, pal.
Yeah, it's frozen there. But you and I are still talking.
But people are reacting with laughter and heart and 100.
There we go. And now it's going.
Now it's going. Okay, fantastic. That's interesting. That was weird. That was weird. Anyway, yeah. So, talking about the nature of Allah. There's a sending error, but we hear you. Okay, I see. Apparently, there's a problem with the YouTube chat, but we are still on, so everything is all right. Okay, all right. Thanks for telling me. Thanks, Sarah, for telling me. So, speaking of disagreements, speaking of Islamic beliefs and all that, there are certain powerful Islamic positions that I would like to challenge you with today. In order to, I know that there are some Muslims that have been intellectually stronger, some not so much. But there are some arguments that I have heard which could change your mind on Islam. So. One of those is the following: why did Jesus and Mary eat food?
I can't tell if you're being silly, right?
Yes.
Is it so? I mean, I could understand maybe thinking, well, if Jesus is divine, why does he need to eat? But so they include Mary in this objection? Is this
the Quran says that the Quran says that Jesus and Mary were just regular humans and they both ate food. So, the question here is, when it is quite clear, as the Quran says, that Jesus and Mary both ate food, why do you consider them both gods?
So first of all, Mary isn't a god. She's not a goddess. She's a creature. She will always be a creature. We think creatures can be exalted by God to have honor and status above others. We think about this even in the human realm. A king has honor and status above, the rest of the people in his kingdom. So in the same way, in the kingdom of God, God can honor and exalt people. We see in Psalm 45, the mother of the queen standing next to the king in gold of Ophir. We think that's a type and image of the Virgin Mary. Now, when it comes to the Son of God, we think that as a subject or an agent, he's identical to the second person of the Godhead in the Trinity, the Logos, the Son of God. So even though he has a fully human nature, we don't believe he's a human person or a human hypostasis. That would be what's called the Nestorian view, and that's what the Council of Ephesus rejects. So we don't think that he's a human person, but he has a fully human nature. That's premised on the Orthodox and patristic teaching of the distinction between nature and person, and that's partly how we have the doctrine of the Trinity. It's how we have Christology, and it's how humans have a distinction, we would say, between person. I'm the person, Jay, but I have the human nature that you have. We all have a common human nature. You're the person, Ridvan. I'm the person, Jay. And there's a distinction there between that. So likewise, in Christ, he's a divine person, but he has a fully human nature. And thus, having a fully human nature, he would get tired. He would cry. He would need sustenance and food because he willed to have a fully human nature. So a lot of times you'll notice in Islamic debates, everything is sort of assumed to be either or. Either he's this or he's that. It's either this or that. And in most Orthodox theology, it's a both and. So we're usually saying there's a relationship in terms of how grace works. Grace and free will work together in synergy. Christ's human nature and his divine nature are fully human, fully divine, and they work together in synergy. So likewise, here, his human nature is real, and so there's no trick going on. You had, for example, in the early church, certain groups that taught that Jesus didn't really have a human nature. It was kind of like a phantasm or a hologram. They're called the Docetists. And so one of the ways that Jesus, I think, wanted to demonstrate that he was fully human is that he's engaging in all of the activities that a human nature would engage in: eating, sleeping, and so forth. So as a divine subject, he didn't need those things, but he willed to undergo those things.
So basically, we can't answer the question, this powerful question from the Quran, which says here in chapter 5, verse 75, it says, "The Messiah, son of Mary, was not but a messenger. Messengers have passed on before him, and his mother was a supporter of truth. They both used to eat food. Look how we make clear to them the signs. Then look how they are deluded." This is obviously a very powerful Quran verse. And
So the Quran's trying to argue that because they ate, they were only human. I mean, is that what it is?
Yes, it's a very powerful argument, which nobody has yet succeeded to debunk so far. Nobody has been able to refute this. The Quran has put this challenge out there forever, and not a single person has ever come across and refuted it, which just shows that the Quran is all powerful and fantastic.
Well, even ironically, even in the Torah, you have the presentation that Moses went up on the mountain and had a meal with God. Abraham had a meal with God in the famous meal with Abraham. So even prior to the incarnation, it's still possible for God to have a manifestation and to engage in what we think are human activities, not because he needed those things, but as a condescension to us. That's our view of it.
Well, I would say that those parts in the scripture which happen to disagree with the Quran are obviously corrupted.
Obviously corrupted, yes.
Yeah, obviously.
But something I've noticed about that, when you start to say that, I know that that's like on the face of it, it's a double standard, but there's another level to which that argument fails, because, well, now wait a minute. The Quran, let's say in the first 10 surahs, like, it sort of refers to and assumes like gigantic sections of the Old Testament. So in other words, you've got gigantic sections of Genesis, Exodus, historical books with David. Like, it's not just one person that's referred to, it's like their story too. So we're running into deeper problems when we start to think about the fact that, well, now wait a minute, if the Quran in many places affirms gigantic portions of the Torah and the writings, but then we're going to turn around and say, oh, well, that section, that part's corrupt. Do you see how it's an even deeper problem? Because, but wait a minute, in these other places, you've actually confirmed these whole stories.
Exactly. Here's another Quran verse that I want to show you, which in chapter... oh, wait. Wrong one. I thought I just opened the right one here. Okay. Quran chapter 5, verse 32. It says here the following. Because of that, we decreed upon the children of Israel that whoever kills a soul, unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had killed all mankind. And whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved all mankind. And our messengers had certainly come to them with clear proofs. Then indeed many of them throughout the land were transgressors. So this is a Quran verse in which Allah supposedly says that it was he who told the children of Israel, the Jews, that whoever kills one soul, it is as if he killed all mankind, and whoever saves one soul, it is as if he had saved all mankind.
Isn't this from the Talmud?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
This is the problem.
This is a famous Talmud quote, because it's cited even by Jews today. Like, Jews will cite this as a principle of Judaism.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the problem. This is actually something that displays the problem with Islam, which relates to what we talked about when we discussed where Muhammad got his information from and how much he was aware of it. So what is most likely the case here, what most likely happened here, is that he is in the presence of Jews in Medina, and Jews famously say this phrase, how, and that this is what they are, this is what they teach and what they are taught according to their book. And Muhammad then thinks that this is actually found in a revelation from Allah, although it is not. This is literally just a rabbinic interpretation. And then he adopts this into the Quran and says that this is what Allah said to the Jews, which is very funny because on the one hand you have Muslims nowadays arguing that the Bible was corrupted, was partially corrupted, and there are some divine revelations in it still, but most of it is, or much of it is corrupt.
Right.
But then the Quran actually wrongly appeals to a book or a text that was written by humans as an interpretation of divine revelation,
thinking that it's Allah speaking in the Torah. Yeah.
Exactly. This just really displays the
So
witness.
it's a misquoted. Yeah, this is like, what did Allah not know the source? Right?
Exactly. He didn't know.
That's a great point.
When you bring this up nowadays, you will get excuses from Muslims, which go into the direction of, Allah told people something, and maybe this was at some point in the Torah,
okay.
and
So
then they
hoc,
removed
right?
it.
Ad hoc. It's just, maybe at one point it was actually in Torah and it got lost or something.
Yeah, and it doesn't even make sense. Like, it wasn't a Torah, but the Jews they didn't bother putting it back into the Torah, but they did write it into the.
But
Talmud.
they put it in the Talmud, but not yet. So we're going to erase it from the Torah and then we'll stick it in the Talmud. Okay.
It doesn't make much sense. Next question that I have for you is: we just talked about Jesus eating food, and Jesus was in an environment that was a Jewish environment. So Muhammad said that meat decays and goes bad because of the children of Israel, so because of the Jews. So can we assume, therefore, that Jesus most likely also ate meat that would decay?
Okay, so this is a new one to me. I'm not understanding the argument. I'm trying to figure out why they would get that. One thing I'm noticing is that a lot of the things that kind of sound odd or that you hear referenced in Islam like this, and kind of like when you were bringing up the pig thing, like it sounds like places in like Ezekiel or like areas of the Old Testament where he misheard or misunderstood what it meant, and then he like repeats it. So this sounds like the manna would be set out overnight. I know that manna is not meat, but it would go bad overnight. So does he think that the food was given to the Jews in the wilderness and it decayed and went bad, so they couldn't collect it?
I mean, it literally says, the prophet said, were it not for Bani Israel, so the children of Israel, meat would not decay. And were it not for Eve, no woman would ever betray her husband. So meat obviously
maybe making a connection between Eve and the fall in like of Adam and Eve, that Adam and Eve fall, and so that leads to decay and corruption in the world, and thus kind of like Eve fell in the Garden of Eden. I mean, this is really bizarre. I have no idea. This is a new one to me.
Well, obviously, meat goes bad because of the Jews. So, I would always, remember, if you ever store meat and it decays, it goes bad and has a bad smell to it, and you can't use it anymore, it's because of the Jews.
You can blame Netanyahu for that. So wait a minute. They have to have some explanation. So tell me, please. Let's Steel Man. What's the explanation for this?
I mean, you can look into explanations which were developed by Muslims later on as an interpretation to what in the world this could mean, and you have different explanations that I saw here and there, of saying, it doesn't say that this is not making a scientific statement on how meat is decaying because Jews did something or because Jews exist. It is merely pointing out that meat was made to decay by Allah due to the wrongdoings of the children of Israel. But that doesn't change anything at all. It's just it's ridiculous in any case. Anyway, ever since I heard this, ever since I've read this and know this, when I buy like food, deli meat or something, and I see it's expired and it has a bad smell, I think, freaking Jews, man.
So so this is all meat in the world, though, right?
Yeah.
So if you're like a Chinese peasant, right, and your fish goes bad,
Jews.
It's Jew. Okay.
Jews. I mean, it's not even the question.
They've never even heard of Jews, but
Well, it's the Jews.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's ignorance, of course. If you don't know that it's the Jews, then you might not know because you don't know what a Jew is. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still the Jews' fault. So yeah.
So if Tiny Mustache Man had been successful and we didn't have Jews, would meat be like immortal?
See what they took from us.
Like all meat would be beef jerky automatically, eternal meat.
Wow. Exactly. We would never ever have to care about storing meat properly again.
So this is like Russian roulette of like the craziest hadiths. So you're stumping me. Basically, you're totally debunking all Christian theology today by these ironclad hadiths that I don't know about. So you've stumped me.
Exactly. Speaking of culinary miracles, the next one would be I'm just going to
invoke Saint Gordon Ramsay and Saint Guy Fieri for any culinary apologetic challenges here.
When a fly falls into your soup, you have to make sure that you dunk it fully in, so that the other wing also touches the soup, because that will cure the disease that is in the fly, and then you can eat it again. Why did Christianity never inform us of this beautiful piece of wisdom?
Because we were deceived by Jews, and we didn't tell you guys the truth about a fly in the soup.
Well, that's actually a good point.
But wait a minute. I just realized something.
What?
Jeff Goldblum is in The Fly. He becomes the fly.
He's a Jew.
He's a Jew. I'm noticing something here.
Oh. So it was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Prophet said, if a fly falls into your drink, in other narrations it says soup, dip it into it, then throw it away, for one of its wings is a disease and the other is a cure. So
this almost sounds like some kind of a parable from like the Dalai Lama or something, right? What does this mean? I don't know, but it sounds like something that the Dalai Lama would say to mystify you, right?
Yeah. You could probably expect some deeper meanings, deeper understandings, philosophical, understandings, revelations about this whole hadith.
We can ask Dr. Khalil what the Neoplatonic esoteric meaning of that is.
All right.
I'm joking because I know he doesn't accept those hadiths. I'm just making it.
Yeah. The next problem would be so Christianity or Christians fail to point out why Jews are wrong forever. And the Quran successfully came in chapter 9, verse 30, and pointed out why Jews are no longer accepted. And it said that the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah. Mm-hmm. And Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah, and that this is why they are regarded disbelievers and should be fought. So why did Christians never say anything about the fact that Jews believe Ezra is the son of Allah?
Yeah, isn't this one of those weird, mysterious passages that we don't exactly know what the heck this is talking about? I mean, first of all, where did Muhammad get the idea that anybody takes Ezra to be a son of God?
Well, if the Quran says it, it must be true. So
I know, but I mean, like, it's just really bizarre. Like, I mean, Ezra has a very minor place in the Bible. I mean, there's the books of Ezra, right? And then there's Ezra is, I mean, he's not a minor figure. He's an important figure because Ezra is really the beginning of the synagogue system. So after Moses, you get this idea that Israel needs to have people to teach the law all throughout Israel. And so Ezra helps to organize what's called the synagogue system throughout Israel and then by extension outside of Israel. So, I mean, he's an important historical figure, but, he's only referenced like in the book of Ezra that I'm aware of, maybe in a couple other places. So he's not a huge figure in terms of the text themselves. And so why or where they would have come up with the idea that anybody takes Ezra to be a son of God or a Messiah. Maybe because he had heard that Jews believe that God is the father to Israel, and thus Israel is a son of God. That's the explanation for the passage that Ezra is son of God. And then, but no Jew thinks that Ezra was the Messiah, son of God. So
yeah, I think he's also mentioned in the book of Esther, isn't he? And But yeah, this is a very interesting mystery. There are some videos of there's this one guy, Corey Gill Schuster. He goes and asks questions to Israelis and Palestinian Arabs all the time in the streets. And I think there are two videos where he goes around and asks Jews if they believe Ezra Ezra is the son of God, and they are all baffled. They're like, "What? Wait, what? I don't know what you're talking about."
So I'm trying to see what would the Quran study Bible, the Quran study Bible says. It says, this is the opinion of one Jew, someone named Finha ibn Azra, that it was the belief of some Jews that Ezra was the son of God. I mean, so Muhammad is taking, and by the way, where does this come from? This idea that this is from a certain Jew called Finha Azura, that some Jews believed that Ezra was son of God. However, this belief eventually disappeared. That's funny because this is similar to their claim that, this is what the Dawa guys, the Fontaine guy, have you heard his new explanation? He's saying that, well, when the Bible talks, or when the Quran talks about the checking the Quran with the Torah and the Injil, this is a Torah and an Injil that existed in Medina at that time that no one has anymore. That's their new explanation.
Yeah, right.
But if you remember, the Quran says you check it with what they have among them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how could Jews do this and Christians do this if it was only this minuscule, unknown Torah and Injil in Medina that no one else in the world has or has anymore?
Yeah.
It was basically a pointless challenge or confirmation.
It doesn't make any sense. Also, given the fact that the Quran basically acknowledges and endorses and guarantees, safety in the hereafter to Jews and Christians initially, and doesn't ever bring up any issue with the scripture that they follow. And you have to assume, and given all the verses about Jews and Christians and the scripture, that the scripture they have, Jews and Christians at that time in general, is okay, is good, is acceptable, and that scripture is, we have it. We have the contents of the Torah and the Gospel from long before Muhammad.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, just the fact that we have so many manuscripts prior to the existence of Muhammad disproves this whole story. But what I'm saying is, like, it seems like it's the same type of ad hoc answer that they're saying.
Exactly.
Well, this was a specific Jew who believed that there was a sect of Jews that thought that Ezra was the son of God, and that they don't exist anymore.
The problem with that explanation, which I heard a lot, is the following hadith here. It's a very long hadith. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Sahih Bukhari 7439, and if you go through this hadith, here is Muhammad explaining to his followers what will happen on the day of resurrection. And then it describes how the Christians and the Jews will be brought before Allah and what Allah will do to them, and he will ask them questions. It says, so then hell will be presented to them as if it were a mirage. Then it will be said to the Jews, "What did you use to worship?" They will reply, "We used to worship Ezra, the son of Allah."
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's which hadith is that? I'm gonna make a note of that.
Sahih Bukhari 7439.
Yeah, okay.
Or you can probably easier find it with these references here. Volume 9, Book 93, Hadith 532. But yeah, this clearly says, and it correctly points out this here, for example. It says, it will be said to the Christians, "What did you use to worship?" They will reply, "We used to worship Messiah, the son of Allah." It seems to go into the right direction here when it comes to Christians, but it makes an equivalence between them and Jews, and says that Jews will say, "We used to worship Ezra, the son of Allah." And if it was just one Jew or just a few Jews here and there, why would this make a generalizing statement about Jews? Yeah, exactly. And this just shows how there was really some confusion going on. I would say because of this, just this verse, chapter 9, verse 30, is very strong evidence that the Quran is an ignorantly written or authored book, that it definitely does not come from a divine source.
Yeah, cobbled together, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Another question is, okay. I was going to bring up sister of Aaron. Have you heard of the argument about Mary in the Quran?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The Quran refers to Mary as Mother Mary, mother of Jesus, as sister of Aaron, which is, of course, very strange because
Yeah.
Mother Mary didn't have a brother named Aaron. We do, however, have another character named Miriam, also known as Miriam in the Bible,
Right.
who was the
Moses
sister of
and
Moses
Miriam.
and
Yeah.
Aaron. Yeah, and that seems to be a big issue.
I'm trying to remember. The only response I've heard to this is from when Shabir Ali says something like, "Oh, well, this was a term they would use in general, like sister could be any relative or anybody amongst the Jews, or something like that, right?"
Sure, yeah. For some reason, we never heard of that until Muslims came up with that.
Yeah, and also, I thought the Quran made everything really clear. So
Yeah, exactly.
why is this so ambiguous here? And this was obviously a very basic mistake. And
Yeah.
if I remember, that this is one of the ones that so Gabriel Sy Reynolds' book, which is really good, he lists about 10 of these problems, and
Yeah.
this is one of the problems he lists. And what's funny is that the scholarship, right, is pretty like unanimous that this is an obvious mistake. The Muslims themselves had to try to grapple with this and offer these various explanations. So to me, that suggests, again, like the Ezra text, no, this is a mistake. This is not a, like, you know.
There is more that really complicates this issue and just points at a clear mistake. For example, the fact that in chapter 3 it describes a character named Imran, who is also the father of Mother Mary. And it further says here in chapter 66, verse 12, for example, and Mary, the daughter of Imran, who guarded her chastity, we blew into her through our angel, and she believed in the words of her Lord in the scriptures. So Mary, daughter of Imran, and Imran happens to sound oddly similar to Amram, who is in the Bible the father of Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. So it must be a huge coincidence that the Quran refers to Mother Mary as both sister of Aaron and daughter of Imran. All of this was just used as some weird, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, and the 66 text here has to be Mary because it's talking about virgin birth.
Yeah.
It couldn't be some other Mary, right?
There's also no doubt about that if you go into chapter 3 of the Quran, which directly, it is called Al-Imran, or
Mary.
Ali Imran, which is the family of Imran.
Right.
And it describes here how Imran and his wife had a daughter, and that was Mary, and Mary then gives birth to Jesus. So that's what it describes. And why in the world, where did Imran come from? How in the world does it happen that Imran sounds like Amram and is assumed to be the Arabic of Amram?
That's a great point. Yeah, I didn't notice this Imran point here.
Yeah.
Although Reynolds might mention it, I just forgot.
Yeah, it's a very, very strong argument against Islam, where it's they are a little bit dumbfounded when they try to defend it.
Well, you know, and to again just kind of back that point up, like if you're a Christian or a Jew and you know the history of these texts, particularly with the Torah and the history of Moses' family, and if you're a Christian and you know the Gospel of Luke, like you wouldn't make this mistake, right? You wouldn't speak this way. But that's just another attestation of the fact that no, the Quran is actually just mixing up what's in the prior revelation.
Exactly. Two final questions. One would be, what do you think about the fact that the Christians corrupted the Bible by removing the Book of Council of Nicaea from it?
The Book of Council of Nicaea. Well, that's funny because that, you know, it is interesting. So 325 AD is pretty late because we would say that all the New Testament texts were pretty much completed by the death of John, which is around, you know, the year 100 or so. So there wouldn't be any new texts after that time. Or at least what becomes the New Testament, even though we don't have the actual what are called autographa, the original things that Paul wrote, just like Jews, Christians believe in tradition. So we believe in an oral tradition. We believe in a written tradition, even outside of what we call the text. And so there was no new gospels or anything that would be added post death of the apostles. For us, that's the deposit of the faith. It's complete when the apostles died. Jude says, contend for the faith once for all delivered to the saints. That means there's a completed body of doctrines that's not just written, it's also oral amongst the apostles. That for us is the apostolic faith, the apostolic deposit. So I don't know what that's even referring to.
Well, this is from the great.
Is this something that is in a hadith or something? Like
no, this is something that is even better than hadith and Quran. This is what the great scholar Sneeko recently said several months ago when he was discussing with a Christian, and he was citing the book Matt, which he didn't know what it refers to.
We have the original manuscripts from the Bible.
Have you heard of the Council of Nicaea? There's been a lot of chapters that have been removed, and the Bible's been tampered and manipulated with a lot over the years. And you could argue about specific people who might have tampered with it, but it's definitely been changed.
I mean, you could say that, but still the original things are still there. So
most people haven't read the original version. You know, like most of the factions of Christianity, the different ones, they go off of the manipulated versions. That's why there's so many different sects of Christianity, and there's only pretty much one. Like you're either a Muslim or you're not. Islam is very consistent. Like I know there's small things like Sunni and Shia, but overall it's just either.
Well, that's small things, yeah.
Sure. Small things, very very small things.
Okay. The Bible's pretty simple too. You just gotta keep the commandments and follow Christ.
Depends on the version of the Bible you're talking about.
What other versions of the Bible are there?
There's so many, bro.
Okay, tell me some.
Okay, let's look up versions of the Bible. We have the King James version, the English Standard Version.
Yeah, the translations are not versions.
The English Bible.
You know.
But there's so many different translations, man.
You know the funny thing about all those different versions, Sneeko?
What?
They're all just different translations, buddy.
So which one do you know is the one to go by? The Quran is just the Quran. You just go by the Arabic version.
That's interesting. We have the Sahih International version, Pictal version, MAS Abdul Salim version, Abdul Halim version, and so on. Wait,
I read those parts of the Bible.
Council of Nicaea.
Oh yeah,
version of the
Bible
Bible
is tampered, but it's just a retranslation. That doesn't mean tampered.
It's been translated 724 languages. Well, they did remove the Council of Nicaea from the original Bible. A lot of people have those parts of the Bible.
Okay, yeah, this is a new one to me. I like this. This is the Sneeko challenge. Why did they remove the Council of Nicaea from the original Bible? Yeah. Now notice earlier, he's actually mixed up, which is usually like a Baptist Seventh-day Adventist argument. They always say, "Oh, the Council of Nicaea happened, and they tampered with the books, and they changed everything, and it's all this new stuff." Also, Jehovah's Witnesses use that argument too to try to say the Trinity was invented by Nicaea. So he's actually jumbled up what is a Protestant, even Arian argument, and then it turns into no, there was this Council of Nicaea that was part of the Bible that was. So he's actually like doubled up his mistaken understanding. That's funny.
Yeah, he heard the standard narrative that some people falsely present about the Council of Nicaea, and then he totally misunderstood it, and he goes on.
You're saying there's a book called the Council of Nicaea?
Yeah.
There's not no book called the Council of Nicaea.
It's not a whole book, but
they have books like
they had a council.
They have the Apocrypher. I have an Apocrypher. You have the Book of Enoch. You have the.
So yeah, this was Sneeko's brilliant moment here, where he pointed out that they removed the Book of Council of Nicaea, and
well, I have to concede. I guess I'm going to become a Muslim now because So
the thing is, I wouldn't want to pick on somebody who doesn't know what the Council of Nicaea is, or who makes this suggestion, in a regular discussion. But when you go on there and you go online, you have a massive audience, and you try to assert that Christianity is false and Islam is true. And one of the reasons why is that there was this Book of Council of Nicaea, which they removed from the Bible. Then, sorry, but what in the?
There was another excellent. I don't know if you saw Sneeko's argument about prayer beads. He said he noticed that Buddhists use prayer beads, and Muslims have these prayer beads, And so he says, so we're worshiping the same God because we're all using the same beads. I'm being serious. I thought that was one of my favorite Sneeko apologetic arguments. So I'm not joking either.
Oh
He
my
really
God.
he thought that was a good argument. I was like, you think that's a good argument, dude? So if
Man.
a bunch of Satanists or, like if a Satanist worships one God, then we're all worshiping one God, or we're all worshiping the same God because it's one God.
I recently looked up the history of prayer beads to figure out when Muslims adopted it and who came up with it first. The first prayer beads are so old, and Muslims simply adopted it most likely from Christians, and then started using them. It's not even it wasn't even a thing in early Islam.
Yeah.
So
I figured that, yeah.
what a stupid argument.
Yeah.
Man,
By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but he had another sort of flop the other day where he put up an argument that Jesus was a Unitarian because he cited Deuteronomy as the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God. And then I gave him a bunch of other texts where I said, yeah, but you understand that that's admitting our position, because in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus affirms his own deity by saying that he can forgive sins, that he's the Lord of the Sabbath, that he will come in glory on in the second coming. And he ended up taking it down. So he had so many so in other words, he's just a funny character because, he constantly puts up these really bad arguments and goofy things, and then he'll end up taking them down.
And why would you do this? There are some. There have been assertions that he was paid some high sums of money for to convert and publicly declare that he's a Muslim and to do this kind of stuff. I can't say that is absolutely true, but it doesn't make sense that that somebody with such a great lack of knowledge on basic things would convert to Islam and then start immediately talking about it as if he knew what he's talking about, and then attempting to refute the Bible when he doesn't even know what Matt refers to and what the Council of Nicaea actually is, thinking that it's a book. It's so silly, and this is what really gets.
I remember right around the time, and this is just what was reported to be true. Allegedly, I don't know if this is actually true, but there was a story that, Tate went and ate with and had dinner with Saudi royals, and then suddenly after that, there's this gigantic push online for Islam. I've always assumed, it's been my thesis that I think probably the Saudis are in some way pushing Islam through the internet, through the West, through these people that we're talking about.
Yeah. There was also a clip where when Tristan Tate had an interview, I failed to remember who it was. I think it might have been on Patrick Bet-David, but when he was talking to him, Tristan mentioned something very briefly about Islam. He said that that he had been offered benefits and a lot of things, in the Middle East for converting to Islam. But he said, but of course I didn't accept it because I know it wouldn't be genuine of me to accept such a thing and to convert to Islam for that. But then, of course, the question that arises is, what about your brother?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So they're not very smart. So it kind of looks like he's telling on his brother without realizing it in that moment. But this is all just speculation. We don't know. Anyway, just the final thing that I have for you, and I want to actually organize another conversation with you to specifically talk about Christianity and what to believe and all that. But my final question, just to finalize this, is why are you Christian?
I'm not. Today, I've had to renounce all of that and become a Muslim because of the powerful hadiths and Sneeko argumentation that's been given. So, you actually, I thought your channel was against Islam, and here you are converting me out of Christianity. So
it's because I'm being paid by Qatar.
All this time you were being paid to actually be a Muslim shill. Wow. Okay.
Exactly. But if we are to make it serious, I don't know if you even can answer this, or if we should do this for the next time. But if you were to tell me within like 1 minute, why I should be a Christian, for example,
Well, you asked why I am. I mean, in my own life, there's a personal sort of subjective side to this, to where, you know, I believe that throughout my life, my many prayers have been answered. I do believe that God has blessed me, has given me all the things that I need. He's been a loving deity to me. So those are the personal subjective reasons. That's not the only reasons. I think in terms of like apologetics and public reasonings and proofs, I think that the dozens and dozens and dozens, there's not just 5 or 6 like most evangelicals think. There's dozens and dozens of messianic prophecies that are very precise. I don't think those could have been faked or staged or, you know, made up afterwards. Those are very strong proofs. Those were, I think, the strongest things that I always found the most convincing about Christianity. There's philosophical argumentation that I think is convincing. The transcendental argument is something I always point to. So those are the main reasons why I personally am Christian. And to other people, I would say, I think that it's true. So, you know, if you want to find a basis for example, in the philosophical sense, the things that we rely on to do science, to do logic, to do, you know, calculations, all that, we use principles that can't be reduced to matter. They're immaterial things. There's universals. There's laws of logic. Those things, I think, make the most sense. They're most coherent in a worldview where you have a personal deity. And I think that points us in the direction of Christianity. There's a lot of other arguments that kind of go along with that. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. But those are some of the reasons why I'm a Christian and why I think other people should be.
Very nice. Thank you. I want to invite you again for another time for to have a conversation about Christianity, about God, that I would be personally very, very interested in.
Sure.
Are you cool with going through super chats here? We have about 20 of them or so.
Sure.
Okay. Shake Mike Wingeling says, J Dummy, the guy that thinks 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. This is troll. Doesn't know Arabic and thinks the CIA wrote the Talmud instead of Mossad. No thanks. I'll take my tafsir from Farid.
Well, you know, it's like I always point out, right? I mean, I think that guy's kidding, obviously, but like,
yeah, it's troll.
So so people think, oh, you can't have something that's 1 and 3. Are you sure about that? Because I could give you 3 examples. 1 × 1 × 1. Does that equal 3? I wrote that wrong. That's supposed to be 1. That is 1. Excuse me. 1 to the 3rd power is all right. So these are all like examples of what, like, this is one thing, but it's also 3 things, right? This is 1, but it's also raised to the 3rd power. It's still 1, right? Mm-hmm. This is 1 × 1 × 1, and that's still 1. So, you know, it's actually pretty obvious that even in the created realm, something can be 1 and many at the same time, and it doesn't involve a contradiction. And so why would we think that necessarily there's a contradiction between God being both 1 and many?
But this is a perfect opportunity for Muslims. Just take this clip from before Jake made the correction, and then use it where it says
1 × 1 = 3, right? Look, he's stupid. We got him.
J. Dyer refutes
exposed
Christianity by accident. Sheikh Yadek, which sounds like a very interesting name, said, JD, would asking if God is all-powerful be a good argument against God not able to become flesh?
Well, this is a little more complex because I think what we mean by all-powerful will be limited and dictated by the worldview or the theology that we have. So, for example, a lot of times atheists say stuff like, oh, if God's all-powerful, could he make himself not exist? And we would say no, because that's not what, if God exists, all-powerful means. So it's going to be limited and conditioned by the being who is the ground and the ultimate authority in that worldview. So what's possible for God and not possible for God is going to be determined by what kind of God you believe in. And in the Christian scheme, there's nothing inherently impossible for the second person of the Godhead entering into time and space. So I don't know if I would immediately go with that route.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. One problem that recently arose on Twitter was that God necessarily cannot eat a sandwich, therefore Christianity is false. Something like that.
Well, if God has a human nature that's fully human, why couldn't he eat a sandwich?
Eternal Vigilance says, thank you both for all you do. God bless you. Thank you so much, Eternal Vigilance. Appreciate it very much. Snugwig CP showed a hadith about Allah sat on a rooster.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that's what I would do if I was Allah. Stefan the Pelted said, example of Arabic eloquence, Mishkat al-Masabih 3:15. What are you talking about? Let's see. Masabih 3:15. Come on, I already did it, man. I already did it. Muawiyah bin Abu Sufyan reported the Prophet as saying, the eyes are the leather strap of the anus, and when the eye sleeps, the leather strap is loosened. So this is an example of the eloquence of Arabic and the great insights that Muhammad had. There is a lot of philosophical stuff here that you can probably dig into.
Deep esoteric wisdom.
Very, very deep, yeah. Jesus is at the throne, Muhammad is in hell, based. I want to play this clip here.
It is totally based.
Okay. Joel Evers, is that Retro David? Oh, hi, sport. It is, actually, yeah. Iron Kipper, considering to turn the Quran into bunny litter every time there is a jinn attack, and upload a video of my rabbit poop on it. I see. That's a good idea. Sheikh Addict said, Muslim, what makes a girl hog tour noise? Christian, not sure. Muslim, you see, you know absolutely nothing about child marriage.
I like that. That is funny because in a lot of debates, when it starts to get a little heated for the Muslim, suddenly it turns into Arabic phrases. And if you don't know them, then they've won the debate.
It is.
I thought this was the religion for the whole world, but suddenly now it's this like you have to have perfect Arabic pronunciation or else you don't know anything.
It is a perfect move. It's a perfect strategy. I actually
the attributes of God.
I clipped this from when Mohammed Hijab talked to Jordan Peterson. It was a perfect moment here.
The attributes of God, how are they knowable? Is that only through relationship with the book? Does that also have an experiential element as far as
والله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم سبحان الله عما يشركون.
Why did you do that? To my question in that manner, I don't understand language. What purpose does that serve in the
This is a great clip. I'm glad you played that. I forgot about that.
How do you know when that's appropriate and when it's not?
I'll be honest, this is one of the funniest streams I've been on in a long time. I totally forgot about that clip, and I forgot Jordan Peterson's reaction. Like, why'd you do that? What was that?
I don't understand the language. Oh, man. L2A, what do Jews and Muslims think about Genesis when it says, let us make men in our image? Who is us? Who is our?
Well, I can tell you that Jews have a long historic debate on what the passage means. I don't know at all what Muslims would say. Perhaps they would say, oh, it's like the Quran, the royal we, this the angels. Is that what they would say?
Yeah, they would say it's the plural of majesty, and Allah refers to himself as we, as in the Quran as well. But then again, you're talking about Genesis. They would say, we don't know if it's authentic or not. It's been corrupted. Yeshua the King said Bible's main focus is redemption and following Yahweh, Yeshua. So why do we have to explain theology, Trinity, when God never focuses on expounding on them?
Well, but he does. In fact, I mean, many passages of the Gospels, and particularly, say, John 5-9, Jesus disputes with the Pharisees about who exactly was appearing in the Old Testament. In fact, he even gives this dispute, the essence energy distinction argument, we would say as Orthodox, when he talks about to the Pharisees, no one sees the Father at any time. And so therefore, who was Moses interacting with and talking to? That's proving and arguing our position as Orthodox, I think. If you get into John 15, 16, 17, Jesus goes into a lot of depth about the relationship between the Father, himself, and the Spirit, the eternal relationship of the procession, and then his sending of the Spirit into time and space. So, in fact, the New Testament, just in those passages, discusses the Trinity many times over. Hebrews 1 is a lengthy discourse on the relationship of the Son to the Father. that the Son is not a creature. So, I mean, these are just two examples of where even the New Testament is debating that. The history of the church is very much concerned with that, because our salvation in the Christian view is bound up with whether Jesus is the Son of God or whether he's just a man. So the Bible does talk about this, and the church fathers talk about it for a reason.
Nice.
We're proud of that.
Eric and Abgunay, it's small compared to Hindu and Zoroastrian books even. That's true. The Quran is tiny. Lili Square says, I just thought about it. When I said the Quran is tiny, I don't know if you've seen
Andrew.
you see Andrew Wilson's
I knew that's where you're going to go. Yeah. Yeah.
randomly came into my mind when I just said tiny. Lili Square, from an Islamic perspective, what's the problem with God giving Moses or Jesus a book containing details of their deaths? They're prophets, after all.
Well, I don't think there's a problem. What you're saying from the Islamic perspective, I think the guys that I was talking to, his argument was that it has to be like this. It's like Allah possesses you and you spit out what is Torah.
Yeah.
Therefore, you couldn't have a recounting of the death. So we think Joshua added that or put that there or whatever. So for us, it's not a problem, because we don't have the same idea as to what. I've noticed this too, and I don't want to hold up your stream, but like
go ahead.
A lot of times, like Muslims think that everybody in the Christian world has like this like dictatorial Protestant interpretation of what texts are from God, right? So it's like they don't see it in our view. It's just like the incarnation. There's a synthesis between the human author and what God intended to convey in the divine revelation. And I think Muslims think of it like it's a dictation from Allah, which actually is the traditional Islamic position. Yeah. And so they think that our view is that. And if you notice in the Daniel debate, he kept arguing like, where's your original perfect text? And it's like, our position doesn't require that. We don't have the same idea of inscripturation as you do. And he keeps foisting his criteria, his position on us. And I think that's a key point they miss.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, even the Jewish perspective, the Orthodox Jewish perspective would be that the Torah is, as it is, revealed and is the word of God directly given to Moses as guidance. But the argument there never is that it must be revealed in the way that Muhammad had his revelations, exactly. Allegedly, according to Islam. That's not the idea. It's just, again, one of those Islamic misunderstandings of how biblical tradition actually
and if you look at Dr. Khalil's talks, like whether it's the Athari or the Ash'ari, like their idea is that Allah has this eternal Quran with him, and then Gabriel just basically spits out the eternal Quran that Allah wanted to be in time and space. So it's like a literal, like a program that's like an AI that spits it out.
Yeah.
And it's not what we think is like God is speaking to the hearts of prophets, but they also have a human element to it, to where they're writing their thoughts and their side of it too.
Exactly. For some reason, the Quran is eternal, and Allah delivers it in some shape or form through Gabriel. But also, the Quran contains several verses that are abrogated by later verses. Don't know why. Doesn't make sense, but it makes sense if Allah has a perfect plan. Divine Mercy said AP is going to become an ortho bro. So sad. LOL. JK. AT Ministries. Hi AP. Where can I get your abridged Sahih Bukhari?
Yeah, I needed to write that down too, because I wanted to get a copy.
Honestly, oh yeah, there it is. Let me see. I don't know. I think I just ordered this from Amazon at some point.
I think that's what I put on my Amazon list, was the one. I think
so. This is it. It looks like this, all in one, no repetitions in this literary hadith. I'm pretty sure you can find it on Amazon. Honestly.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good addition to, quick sources about all the hadith. Very, very nice. Eric and Abkunay, can we get a shaky booty versus Mufti Ayatollah Armin, inshallah, soon? But first we have to do Randy Balls versus
Shaky booty, exactly.
Yeah. That will be the ultimate debate. The world is not ready for that, man. Jack said, thank you for the laughter. So needed. Thank you for the laughter, Jax. Celeria Rosencraw, they fly, cure disease, nonsense sounds Beelzebuten. That is true. Very much.
I don't know. I think that Muslims really need to capitalize on that Jeff Goldblum fly angle there.
There were some apologetics from decades ago that still came up like a decade ago or so, which explained that the hadith about the fly and the soup is actually a miracle because it turns out that certain insects that fly may actually contain in their wings something that you could extract to use in fighting or curing a certain disease. But none of it actually makes sense. It doesn't talk about house flies. It doesn't talk about just dunking them into your soup.
Now, I remember, didn't they, even before I was interested in Islamic stuff, I remember seeing videos and books. I even found a book one time, maybe 15 years ago, where they would argue about, the Quran's proven by all these miracles about the Quran, and there's miracles within the Quran. But I don't hear them using this argument very much.
It has become less popular, especially over the last 10 years, I would say. You could still hear, like 10 years ago, people popularly going to the idea that the Quran contains all these scientific miracles.
Yeah.
We had recently even popular Muslim apologists like Ali Dawa, who happens to be a very big intellectual powerhouse. He said that the scientific miracles narrative, that he himself believed in it and it made him convert to Islam, but it has been debunked. He explicitly said that it has been debunked. It is not valid. It's not a good point, and people shouldn't be using it anymore because you can't appeal to science to prove that the Quran is true. And
would this be because the Quran itself doesn't say that you can go to science? Why would they not want to use that?
Well, they developed the idea that they would be giving science too much authority to judge over what is true and what is not. But the problem with that is that the Quran repeatedly appeals to the natural world and says, do they not see how we created the heaven with no crack in it, and how we did this and that? So the Quran itself repeatedly appeals to the science.
Isn't there also a place in the Quran, I was trying to remember this, like, isn't there something like where it says something like, if you doubt this, recite it and listen to how beautiful it is? And isn't there something like that?
There are references like that. There, if you have doubts, I'm not sure if there is a passage specifically about the recitation. If there is, I don't remember.
Something like, how could this be composed the way that it is if it wasn't?
It does. It makes references to that, how beautiful and how wonderful this text is, or this revelation, this message is, and how no one can make anything like this, and it is perfect. This is why also the challenge exists, that nobody can bring a chapter or a verse or a book that is better than the Quran.
That's it. That's the one I'm trying to think.
Exactly.
Which is a ridiculous argument, but
I even discussed this with a Muslim academic at Harvard. I had him on my channel. I interviewed him and I asked him the question. Said, "Does this question even make sense?" Because it seems that the challenge would be invalid and illogical. He said, "Yeah, I agree. It doesn't make any sense because there is no standard by which you can judge whether a text is better or worse." So, and it would always be in the hands of the Muslims to decide.
Exactly.
No, yours is not better than the Quran. The Quran is
clearly this one's better. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Obviously, this is much better. But it's just
that's like which one tastes better? Well, clearly this soup tastes better. It doesn't have a fly in it. Right.
Good point. Ayatollah Khamenei said, "Chef Allah." And now for our third course, we have nearly rotten meat with a dipped double fly wing sauce.
No, there's no Jewish chefs around, so.
I have to give them one thing. So we talk about these culinary things, and we mock them, we make fun of them. There's one thing that is respectable about the culinary practices and advices, which would be when a group of people came to Muhammad, they felt very sick, so he told them, go and drink the milk and the urine of a camel, and you will feel better. So they went away, and then they came back, and they allegedly felt better, but then they ended up killing this Muslim guy, and taking all his camels and then running away with it. So for some reason they were convinced, or it helped them. They felt better, but then they ended up robbing this guy, this Muslim, and then running away with the camels, and which is why they were apprehended and then killed by cutting off their hands and feet from opposite sides and branding them and
Has anyone considered the thesis that Muhammad and the Hadith authors might just be writing comedy? Like, does anybody consider that thesis?
I don't know, but when I read that story, it just makes me think, wait a minute. So Muhammad gives them the advice, hey, how about just drink some urine, drink some camel urine? They're like, okay. Then they go, and when they come back, they're so mad that they actually kill Muhammad's guy and take all his camels and try to run away. It looks like they weren't really happy with the advice.
Okay, so it really pissed them off, right? By the way, does that mean that you drink them separate, or am I supposed to put them together? Like,
depends by your preference, whatever you like best.
Okay.
I guess. Yeah. But that's why I always have a bottle of urine here. Call of Ghidorah. Hello, boys. Do either of you know what the Shia Hadith say about Aisha? Praise to Odin. How dare you? I'm not extremely familiar with Shia Hadiths. They have the Kitab al-Kafi, which is different narrations about what things that Muhammad said. They don't have a very good view of Aisha, Muhammad's child bride. They usually call her a prostitute and things like that. They're pretty harsh about her. But I'm not sure how much of that comes from the Hadith, honestly. You'd have to ask somebody else about that. Not very good with my Shia stuff. Subham, hey AP, please live with ex-Muslim Sahil and Adam Seeker, inshallah, one day. Tenublet, chats bugged, boys. Only super chats can fix it. You know what? It actually got fixed when I went into the settings of the stream as it was happening and switched to subscribers only mode, and then back again to no subscribers only mode. Then suddenly the chat started working again. Very, very weird. Wild. It was probably the Jews. Karamazov said, I feel like Jonathan Peugeot would like to go on a hyper analysis of the symbolism of the fly in the soup hadith.
That's funny. I do think you're right, though, to call attention to the fact that a lot of the symbolic and the, like, even going into deep debates with Muslims about the attributes, it's like doing a disservice because it's giving the impression that this is like this really sophisticated, deep, but really it's just a bunch of goofy stuff.
Yeah, it is pretty dumb. It's the example of, for example, in the Quran in chapter 18 verse 86. That is also the part where it talks about Alexander the Great. That is where the Quran mentions that he went to the setting place of the sun, and he found it setting in a dark, muddy water. And he found it near it a people, and so on. So it says he found the sun setting in a muddy spring, basically. Nowadays, when you discuss this, Muslims will talk about what this actually means and the metaphorical aspect of it and how it appears when you look from a distance at the sea and so on. But the thing is, the earliest Muslim exegetes weren't quite that deep about it. For example,
it didn't have this deep symbolic esoteric meaning.
Tafsir al-Tabari is one of the earliest exegesis, and it discusses this verse on over multiple pages, and all it does is it talks about where this place is, where the sun sets in a muddy spring, and then it talks about how whether the spring is hot or just dark or muddy, and so on. So it's
allegorical exegesis.
No, nothing at all. It's quite literally just seeing the sun actually setting in a muddy spring. You have to read into it to come up with something deeper.
The notes here say we need not read this in a literal way. It says It is probably just describing the way that the sun would appear to set to the human perspective.
Of course. But for some reason, it's also the setting place of the sun. Yeah. Noam MKW, don't you feel bad for the Gazan kids who can't celebrate 9/11? So sad. that's pretty. That's pretty dark. Yeah, you have. I posted it earlier today. We have always had the videos of Muslim populations, including and especially the Palestinian Arab population, celebrating 9/11. And it's no lie. I grew up among Muslims. I grew up as a Muslim immigrant in Germany. It was the normal thing to justify it or to be happy about it. Or to be quiet about it because we don't want to brag about it too much, or to say, well, what about Iraq? And so on. This was the general Muslim attitude. Shouldn't be a secret. But yeah, whatever. Neil7777. Now I know why a small mustache man hated Jews. His favorite meat decayed when he was a child. This makes sense. This explains one of the reasons why Hitler went all mad. Or Hirschfield made a super sticker, which I cannot see here, but I'm sure it's a very good one. Thank you. Roge Murray made a super sticker, which I also can't see. Interesting. Jordan Flores, but thank you. Is Randy going to do an altar call?
In the next third installment of Randy Ball videos, I will do an altar call just for you, Jordan.
That's good. That's good. See, you heard it here first. John Smith, as someone who has read the book of the Council of Nicaea, I can confirm Islam is true. Caleb Warku, Jay, thoughts on Aisha age and her marriage to Momo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obviously a sign that this is a weird cult that, they work so hard to defend this, that Daniel and Jake and these people, like, I thought it was odd in the debate. It didn't bother me, but it was like the first half of the debate's about attributes in the Quran. And then suddenly all they wanted to debate was about trying to prove that Christianity affirms their view of child marriage. And I'm just like, it doesn't. But even if there were younger ages of consent, like, I just don't understand what they were trying to prove with that, with getting me to say that, medieval Catholic canon law allows you to marry a girl after puberty if she's 13 or 14. I'm like, but what is that? I don't understand what this is supposed to prove. That therefore then a prepubescent marriage is okay. I mean, it's just a really bizarre line of argumentation. I think it's absurd, honestly.
Why don't you condemn Thomas Aquinas? Wasn't that what he repeatedly?
Yeah, that was, I think, Daniel said that, and then Jake made a video about that. Yeah.
And you even said, I'm ready to condemn it.
And okay.
See, he fails to condemn.
and then they made a video saying, then they said, see, he won't condemn Aquinas for this. I'm like, okay, Aquinas is wrong. It's like they didn't even care that, like, to the Orthodox, we're not really that concerned with Aquinas, but whatever. But even if we accepted Aquinas, like, I don't have a problem saying that there can be different times and different places for what's acceptable for marriage, but that wouldn't vindicate child marriage.
They also, I don't know if you looked into this afterward, but Daniel Kikicu lied in the debate with you once again about the Catholic Encyclopedia when he made the claim that the Catholic Encyclopedia says that Mary was 12 years old or so. And that this is totally fine in the Catholic Encyclopedia. This is not true, and he has been confronted on this multiple times. And
I didn't actually look it up. What does the Catholic Encyclopedia say?
What does it say? I had it pulled up before because I went through.
Or whatever he's been confronted with. I'm not familiar with this.
Let's see. Incarnation, devotion, marriage. Oh yeah, here. Let's see. So we have the source here when it comes to the marriage. It says here, it is probably at Nazareth that Joseph betrothed and married her, who was to become the mother of God. When the marriage took place, whether before or after the incarnation, is no easy matter to settle. And on this point, the masters of exegesis have at all times been at variance. It will not be without interest to recall here, unreliable though they are, the lengthy stories concerning Saint Joseph's marriage contained in the apocryphal writings. When 40 years of age, Joseph married a woman called Melka or Esha by some, Salome by others, and so on. It then further says, oh yeah, here. They wished to find in the tribe of Judah a respectable man to espouse Mary, then 12 to 14 years of age. Joseph, who was at the time 90 years old, went up to Jerusalem among the candidates. A miracle manifested the choice God had made of Joseph, and 2 years later, the Annunciation took place. So 2 years, according to this narrative, after she was between 12 and 14 years old.
So 14 to 16.
Yeah. These dreams, as St. Jerome styles them, from which many a Christian artist has drawn his inspiration, see, for instance, Raphael's Espousal of the Virgins, are void of authority.
Yeah, it's apocryphal, right.
Void of authority. They nevertheless acquired in the course of ages some popularity. In them, some ecclesiastical writers sought the answer to the well-known difficulty arising from the mention in the Gospel of the Lord's brothers, and so on. So, first off, void of authority. Secondly, it explicitly says here, unreliable though they are. So the Catholic Encyclopedia here never makes the claim that this is the age of Mary when she was married. It only says that there are certain traditions, unreliable from the perspective of the Catholic Encyclopedia, and have no authority. But Daniel has been corrected on this, but he will repeatedly claim that even the Catholic Encyclopedia today says this. So this is another lie that he makes about, that he repeatedly tells about child marriage to justify it. And it's such a horrible trick. I mean, who is actually convinced when they debate and argue for child marriage? Who actually watches this and says, oh, okay, they're making a good point. I guess it's okay to marry children.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of sad, but I mean, that reminds me that there was that, I don't know if you saw that video of Sheikh Uthman was doing the same thing, where he was saying that the Torah has proof that Rachel was 3, and it's not true. That's one
Rebecca.
rabbi in the Talmud giving an opinion that he thought she might be, which is not in the Torah. So
yeah. It's not. It's all completely irrelevant and ridiculous. Jim asks, if Allah is all-powerful and all-knowing, can abrogation exist? Well, technically it could. It would be part of his plan, right? To send a Quran that has prior verses that abrogate, or later verses that abrogate prior ones. But it's kind of weird that Allah would have this eternal revelation sent to humanity, revealed within just 20 years. And within those 20 years, there are verses that are abrogated by later verses for some reason.
Yeah.
It's a weird plan. Then again, you can't question the wisdom of Allah. Just do it, Jay. What's the hardest debate you've had and why?
I guess it's a tough one, because I mean, you could say hard in terms of like whether the opponent is really obtuse and stupid, or hard in the sense of like, did somebody propose a real challenge? I mean, we haven't really had a debate with anybody that had a significant hard argument to answer, because most of the time I try to know my opponent's position as best I can. I'd say probably one of the better debates is maybe Dr. Malpass, because he knows. I think when I debate somebody who's an actual professor or like has a degree in philosophy, those usually go better, because they know philosophy and they don't make stupid arguments and you're not getting frustrated. But so far there hasn't been a person that I think really like stumped me or like, won. I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just saying I don't think that there's been one yet. There could be, but not so far.
What about Muslim Lantern? I heard that Muslim Lantern was really tough and really defeated you in the debate.
I actually thought he would. I expected better of him. I mean, I was not familiar with him. I'd never seen any of his stuff. But then pretty quickly into that, I could see that he was not going to be a very good faith debater. So he was actually probably one of the lower tier.
Yeah. Jerome, Allah refuting the divinity of Christ and of Mary, who is part of the Trinity. Quran 575. Jesus and Mary ate food. Never heard of the hypostatic union. Yeah, the Quran fails to completely understand anything about the nature of Christ. Go ahead.
This is a really good point too that's overlooked. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if I was going to believe the Quran, if the Quran wanted, if the compiler, if they wanted to convince me, they would at least get the theology right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They would say, oh, at Nicaea, these errant Christians, taught that Jesus is the second person of the Godhead and that he's homoousios. But they don't even get the basics right.
Yeah, precisely. And this is not the only verse that is that also, by the way, references Mary as part of
Trinity.
the Godhead. It also refers to, look at this. You might have seen this verse. If not, I would say is definitely something to look into. So chapter 5, verse 116. And when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, did you say to the people, take me and my mother as deities besides Allah? He will say, exalted are you. It was not for me to say that to which I have no right, and so on. So just by saying that Allah will ask Jesus this question, did you tell the people to take me and my mother as deities besides Allah? The Quran is seemingly implying here that that Christians do indeed believe in Jesus and Mary as part of the Godhead and divine, which Muslims today try to explain by saying, "Oh, it was probably in reference to a sect of Christians and all that." But it's again one of those, you can say anything nowadays.
Well, this is funny because you'll notice if you have a debate with a Muslim who knows his religion, he always has the expectation and the demand that you present his position accurately, right?
Yeah.
How come the Quran didn't present accurately the 7 centuries of Christianity prior to it?
Exactly. It's because the Quran's author didn't understand anything that the Christians or the Jews believed, which is why he got so many things wrong. Nico, hey AP, do you find moral issues in the Old Testament challenging, or has David Wood helped with interpretation? It could be fun to discuss with Jay, God bless. In all honesty, I've never really had big issues with the moral problems in the Old Testament. And this might sound surprising to some people, especially to atheists and others, but I also said in the past, for example, that I can't condemn even slavery that took place several centuries ago. If slavery is a norm that you deal with, that you do in a society where this is how you deal with your enemy in order to stop them from being a danger for you in the future, and you put them to some use instead of massacring them, if that was the norm, I can't blame people in that time for the slavery that they participated in. I could say that this is even, I know this is very controversial, but I could even go into the future with that to the United States of America. I can't condemn individual slavers and slave owners in that society where it is a normal thing. I would say it's good that it is eventually abolished, but condemning individuals for doing that, no. In the time of the Old Testament, it is a time that is profoundly, completely different from our modern time, where a different handling of matters may have been required, and it was okay for that time. Both Christianity and even Judaism, which does not believe in replacing or fulfilling or abolishing the old law, both moved on from much of it. Even Rabbinic Judaism, for example, in the Talmud discusses how certain matters are matters of the past and no longer applicable in our time, and so on. So I have no problem acknowledging that there are things that were considered okay back then, not today. It's all right. Do you have any comment on that, Jay?
No, I pretty much agree with that. I think you have in the ancient world God meeting people where they were, and he didn't have, if you look at the way the Bible progresses in our perspective, there's very few expectations put upon people in Noah's day. Very few expectations even in Abraham's day. So the expectations kind of grow with mankind's progression. And the church fathers discuss this from a kind of immaturity to maturation. And so the expectations, Jesus says, to whom much is given, much is required. So as we progress in terms of history, I think there's God can expect more because of progression.
Yeah, that's good. Grixie Gregory of Nyssa refutes you, AP. Do you really want to have a discussion about Jews now? Or I'm pretty sure that this is what this is about. I'm not going to have that discussion. Old Testament, New Testament, Truth, Dinosaur, Old Testament, New Testament. Fantastic comments here. Eric Al-Harb said, Jay, I'm Orthodox. A Catholic asked me what the difference between procession and inspiration is, and that ultimately our distinctions in the hypostasis collapses into meaninglessness because we can't define these terms.
Yeah, but this is missing that this is actually his own Catholic Church in confirming Constantinople I affirms the position that we have as Orthodox, which is the Cappadocian position. Cappadocian position is that we believe in a distinction between generation and procession because it's revealed that way, Basil says. He says what the distinction is, we do not know and we're not told, but that there is a distinction we do know. And the other way we know is by what's called hypostatic properties. So the Father is the sole cause, the Son is generated, and the Spirit is spirated. Those are the hypostatic properties that distinguish the persons. So the attempt by Catholics to speculate about other ways to make distinctions, we believe, goes out of the bounds of what's defined at the Second Ecumenical Council.
That sounds pretty based. I don't know what you said, but yeah.
It is totally based.
That's a soundbite that I took from a rabbi who was discussing the difference.
I was wondering what that sound is. That's funny.
I took it out of context, of course. He was discussing how the Christian idea of original sin and the Jewish idea are differ, but he was explaining it and saying, although we have disagreements, the Christian idea is totally based on the Jewish idea as well, and we, with the same thing. But he had this odd long pause after the word base, and I thought, hey, that's perfect.
Look that. Okay.
Greek C, I was talking about slavery. Okay, I'm sorry for misrepresenting you. Okay. Thanks. I don't know what you meant, though. So, Jeffrey Anderson, Quran 9:30. What do you think about the idea that Muhammad conflated Ezra and Elijah, given the importance of Elijah in the heralding of the Messiah, not just from the Tanakh, but Jewish Seder customs? Before Jay gives his thoughts on this, I would say that I just have one problem with it, which is that, so in the Arabic text, in chapter 9, verse 30, the name used is Uzair, which is then thought to be Ezra. The Quran also mentions Elijah as Elias in different verses, which I know very well because I used it quite a bit in different discussions about how Islam is ignorant of the name Yahweh.
Yes.
Because Elijah literally means my God is Yahweh. That's my problem with it. But what do you think, Jay?
No, I was going to say exactly the same thing. That I don't know Arabic, but I had it written in my notes that when it says Ezra, it's Uzair, and you had that great clip where you pointed out that Daniel was ignorant of what the word Elijah means.
Oh yeah. It's funny because he never got back to the topic on that.
No, he just ignored it. Yeah.
Yeah, when he does that, it's a clear sign that he simply doesn't know how to answer.
and is incapable of admitting any error, which is odd.
Exactly. Serendipitous Shark, did you see the Christian guy that wrote a Christian Quran in Arabic? Shabir Ali said it wasn't equivalent since it didn't claim to be from God.
Well, that's all you need, right? Like, if you just say that this book's better than the other books and it's from God, that's what was missing.
Yeah. I had even I worked a little bit with ChatGPT to make it write verses in the style of the Quran, and it was quite okay. I did all kinds of things like write a chapter about Chinese food in the style of Quran chapter 114 or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good. But yeah,
was there a bat in the soup or a fly in the soup? If it's
I should have added that.
The Wuhan bat in the fly soup.
make a chapter about Chinese food with both a fly and a bat in the style of Quran chapter 114.
I like it.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. This was a fantastic stream. Thank you so much, Jay, for joining me.
Sure, anytime.
Want to definitely follow up and do another live stream about religion and Christianity in general. Anything else you want to add, and also quickly where people can find you once again?
No, it was a great chat. Appreciate you having me. Always enjoy the conversation with you. I always learn from you. So anybody I learn from, I love to have conversation and joke around with.
Same.
So, yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me over on my channel, Jay Dyer on YouTube, Jay's Analysis, his website. You can find me on X, Instagram, all of those, TikTok under my name. Fantastic.
Awesome. I'm gonna quickly read this one. Amit Sabag, here are some of my shekels. Shekels. I was gonna make a joke about shekels, but I can't find my one shekel bill that I have. From someone somewhere in Gaza. By the way, I'm from J-Town, and I actually got out looking for you in the old city. Unfortunately, I didn't. Thank you for the word of truth. When I was in Israel, lots of people said, "Hey, I saw you." Nobody actually texted me saying, "Hey, what's up? I see you right now. Let's meet up." It's very funny. But yeah, all the best, Amit. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. As always, have a fantastic day. And I will end this with a wonderful message from one of my favorite goats here once again.
Stay away from Islam.